2020 school board meeting to order. We're all present. Have y'all had a chance to look at the July 9th, 2020 minutes?
Make a motion to be approved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor with a right hand vote? Any opposed? That passes. The July 4th, 2020 minutes.
I'd move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor with a right hand vote? That passes. That brings us to public comment, and we have one. Myra Green. You can come right up here. I'll start your time, and we have a max of 5 minutes, and you can speak. We just ask that you don't name any students by name, and you can talk.
It's on.
It's on. I was told that we were possibly discussing part of the ag program tonight. Is that correct?
It is.
I just wanted to say that I believe that we need to put every effort into this. We've seen a lot of interest through our business in the ag program, and I feel like if we skimp, we're going to lose students to other places that are doing a better job than we are. So I don't exactly know what was on the agenda, but I just feel like I wanted to go on record as saying there is a lot of interest out there. I don't know if y'all are seeing it in the school or if y'all are seeing it as a school board, but we're seeing it through our business. And I just think that it would be a very great asset to this community if we had a really well-supported ag program.
I think you'll like what you hear tonight.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That brings us to the consent agenda. Have y'all had a chance to review that?
I move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? There's 2 items in there, the financial report and a resignation. Any discussion? All in favor on the consent agenda with a right hand vote? That passes unanimously. That brings us to superintendent's report.
Obviously, with a number of things that I want to go over with you, and I'm going to try to not repeat things that we talked about last month, although I'm sure I will to some extent. Let me first, even though it's listed second, let me tell you where our enrollment is right now. We are actually, and now, again, school hadn't started, and we'll have some no-shows that are enrolling in other schools. We know that. Always, that's normal. But right now, we're about 50 more than we had last March, which I'm quite pleased with. Especially considering this, we ended, in March, when we were last in school, we were at about 265 in kindergarten. And that's been about where we've been the last few years, 260, 265. Right now, our enrollment is 200, down quite a bit. As I've talked with superintendents around everywhere, not just in this area, but all across the state, everybody is seeing the same thing. Kindergarten enrollment is way off. Now, I don't think that we have fewer 5-year-olds in the world and in Arkansas, certainly not by that number. You do not have to begin school at 5 years old. You can wait until you're 6 years old to start kindergarten. That's in Arkansas law. And we all think that that's what's happening, that parents are waiting, are just sitting, waiting to see what's going on, see what's happening, knowing that they can wait a year, and that's just fine. So if you take out that, and it'll come up some more still, of course, but if we're down 40 in kindergarten, right off the top, and right now our enrollment is up 50, including that being down 40, allowing for that. I'm really pleased with where our enrollment is, and I'll come back to something else about that in a minute. The thing that could be interesting to deal with, if this is true about kindergarten, that this past year we had 265. This year, let's say it's 220, and then the next year those 40 come and we're at 300. And we'll have that small class, large class for the next 12 years to work through school. And that'll be interesting, juggling teachers, number of teachers per grade and all that, if that comes to pass. Now, that's just looking into the future. But back to the point, I'm really happy with where our enrollment is. And I'm probably going to end up jumping around a little bit, and I apologize for that. As a result of our survey of what children we're going to be doing this fall, our schools, our principals and assistant principals, counselors, and in many cases teachers, we've been contacting a lot of parents. You remember on the survey, we asked for a phone number so that we knew that since they just gave it to us, we knew that was a good phone number. Everybody that said anything on the survey other than they're coming to school, and many of them too, we've called, or we're still in the process of that, but we are calling. Many of them, one of the reasons we wanted to call, a couple of reasons, if they're going to be doing remote learning, we needed to talk to them about when do you want to come get your Chromebook. We have some forms you need to fill out, those kinds of things, and we worked all that out. But also in many cases, we wanted to verify that what they checked on the form, on the survey, was really what they meant. And because we know it's a little bit confusing. We tried to use clear terminology, but still it's a little confusing. So we wanted to verify that what they said is what they meant. And we even getting ahead of myself again. So we've talked to a lot of parents in the last week, and we're not done. We're still working at that. Brian, how'd that go today?
It went real well. We had made a lot of contacts. We started with making contacts with students that were in the virtual online academy and also the blended to make sure they understood kind of what they wanted. And then we got most of those done, and we started contacting all of our CAP teachers. They have about 20 to 25 kids, even the ones that have indicated that they're coming back to school. Just making sure, hey, you got everything you need, how's everything going, tell them when they can get Chromebooks, how to check stuff out. Went really well. I think we're really pleased, and our numbers were really, really good. I can't give you a percentage because some of those phone calls are still in progress, left messages, but it was absolutely the right thing to do, and went great.
Bob, same question.
We started calling last week, I guess, anybody who said they wanted to be blended or remote, and we've asked those people to come in and visit with us so we can get confirmations and expectations of getting Chromebooks delivered. And we're taking care of our online academy, talked to the 12 that indicated they wanted to do that, and we dropped that number to just 3. And anything else on that? We've made good contact. Everybody's been at least, we've tried to make contact with every single kid. And I think we're only waiting on maybe 1 or 2% that haven't called us back.
Kim?
We are much the same, as far as we've contacted all of our virtual, all the parents that have indicated that they want to do virtual, and we ended up with just, I think 4 kids so far that are going to do that. And then our teachers will start the process of calling everyone in their homeroom class. We'll start that tomorrow to get a schedule and just a confirmation for what the plan is for every student in the classroom. And we have talked to all of this parents, or many of the parents that indicated they wanted to go remote. So that's an in-process thing, but it's been a good thing too. I mean, we can't do it without contacting all of the parents for sure.
That's been very labor intensive, but it was also very important for us to do. So we've certainly done that. You put those 2 pieces of information together, what I said about enrollment and what you just heard from them, it looks like we only have a very, very few students that are not going to be our students this fall because they're going to homeschool in some other way or do something, go to a private school or do something else. Looks like it is a very low number, less than 10, maybe less than 5. So I'm very pleased with that.
What was the final breakdown? I know we were still making calls.
First of all, I'm overwhelmed with the number of parents that responded. We had just over 3,100 students fill out the survey, or parents fill out the survey on behalf of their students. So we had 150, 175, something like that didn't. And that's they've been calling those kids too, or their parents. And in many cases, the parents said a couple of answers. Oh, I thought I did. Or, yeah, we're still thinking about it, just hadn't done it yet, even though we closed it, it wasn't available anymore. So at this point, we've talked to, or we will have talked to everybody. If they didn't call us, we're calling them to be sure that we know what they're doing. Back to your question. Based on the way the survey came in, now, you just heard it's changed some as they've contacted them, but on the 3,100 that we heard from and what it said on the survey, about 68% said they were coming to school, 20% said remote learning, and about 10% said blended. I'm a little off on my rounding there. That's a little higher than other schools that people, like superintendents I've talked with, don't know why, don't have any explanation for why. Excuse me, the number not coming to school was a little higher, not coming to on-campus class than other districts. Not sure why, but it, that's what they told us.
So you think we're about 2% on the online academy?
That's what it was. That's what it was on the calling or on the survey. But after what you just heard the principal saying, it's down to 0.5% now. It's a few, but it's just a very, very few. I want to go over. I want Travis to go over for you how things work as we have cases. As the governor said today, if you caught his afternoon briefing, we're going to have cases in schools. We know that. I don't know. We've already had a few. We know we're going to have more. Many schools have already had some. And the state, the health department has given schools very, very specific procedures to follow. So let him walk you through that.
But the first part of that, we've had 6 positive cases in our Alma family, Alma School District family. 1 adult and 5 students. And then we've had 23, what we used to say direct contact, and it's now PCC, possible close contact is the official word. 4 adults and 19 students. So I'm going to say a little bit, and then we'll go into the real details. This has been the POC. I'm the point of contact for the district.
To the state.
To the state.
Every district has to have a designated person that is the state's contact with us.
So I'm going to have help when school starts with Dr. Wood and JD and Ray Lynn and Deanne. The assistant principals at the schools will be my point of contact on the school campuses itself. So this is a very, you hate to say labor-intensive duty, but when we first discussed this way back when, we didn't think it was going to be. But then when we had our first call of a positive, it went on for about 6 hours to trying to contact each and every possible close contact. I want to say this before I get going. The biggest thing that is misunderstood across our district and I think across the state, possible close contacts are 48 hours before when the test, let me back that up. 48 hours from the last contact with the positive person. So if we found out John is positive, then I will go research with John, his family, the coach, the teacher, whatever it might be, and figure out who is the PCC in that area. But we only go back 48 hours. There has been some calls, some misunderstandings of that. They're saying, why did my son's on the football team, you didn't call him and you didn't give him in quarantine? Well, he did not fall into that 48-hour period. So after the rules and regulations kind of get understood, then parents they understand that as well. Now, they have every right in the world to keep their kid out even if I didn't call them. If I didn't call them and they were 55 hours earlier, then they have a right to say to their kids. But the protocol that I'm following is 48 hours before that last contact.
That's state health department regulation.
From the notification that there's a positive test, or when they test?
From when the test was administered, or when they first had symptoms, whichever comes first.
That's correct. And that, again, we do the best we can to find out when that was. And obviously, when kids are everywhere, you don't know where the kids are. We're meeting with all the teachers and the coaches and everything else and trying our hardest to emphasize seating charts, group charts, all of that. Because again, if you're 6 foot apart, I can be with Mr. Woolley all day long. But if I'm 6 foot apart and he gets it, I am not a direct contact because I've been away 6 foot.
So it's both things, the 48-hour that we were just discussing, and within 6 feet
6 foot.
15.
That's right. So within 6 foot for 15 minutes cumulative for a 24-hour period. So just because Chapin and I are in the same room for all day long does not necessarily mean that he or I are the direct contact of that person. So some parents and all of us are learning that we are not leaving that person out, but in the state protocol of the ADH that we're following exactly right. Chapin would not fall into my category.
Does that
So-
make sense? I mean, I want to be sure everybody's clear about how that works, because it's complicated. It's
So-
confusing to us.
If somebody falls in that category, what happens then?
If they fall in the category, I call them directly.
Now-
If they're 18 or older.
Let's clarify, that's only Alma staff or Alma students. If it's,
Right.
an aunt that was in the house with the family, that's on the health department's work list, not ours.
So the original plan was I would get all the research, and the first time we had 12 kids that was fall into that category. I contacted all 12 parents because they were not 18, explained to them. I give them an approximate date that they could come back, which is 14 days. I give them an approximate date. The ADH, I would call and I would give them all the information that I've researched. They would send an ADH tracer to that case, and then they would research it and make sure that my research was correct. And then they would tell them what that date is for return. That was the way it began. In this last case we've had, it does not go that way now. Now it is my responsibility as the POC of the district to tell them when they can come back. The reason that is they are overwhelmed across the state of Arkansas. So they're contacting only the positive cases. They are not contacting the close contact people. Now that's up to the POC in the district. If they slow down, then they will contact some of the PCC still. But, and every time that I call a parent, I will say, this is your date that you can return unless the ADH calls you and tells you another. Because they trump my number, obviously. They trump me if I say August 12th and they might have been August 13th and they would win theirs.
What if that contact goes and is tested and they test negative?
Good question. The answer is they still have 14-day quarantine.
Okay.
The
3
negative,
weeks ago, that's incorrect. 3 weeks ago, they told us, or 4 weeks ago, how long it's been, said that if they went and got a negative contact, they were
or negative test.
negative test. If they get a negative test, then you could incubate for 3 days. There's all kinds of stuff. I don't want to say it because I don't want to confuse everybody. But I have truly lived this for about 3 weeks. And unfortunately, I'm getting pretty confident of what I'm saying now.
But a negative test does not shorten the quarantine.
Okay,
No.
no question.
What
So-
if, say, Mr. Woolley tests positive and y'all tell me I was in his office for 15 minutes and I said I was only in there for 10, I do not fall under that.
I would call the ADH and say that I believe Ms. Jernigan was in there. They would then contact you and ask you, and then they would, again, get to tell you if you're right or wrong, I guess is the right answer. The ADH would, Carrie, I say true, I haven't had that issue,
Yeah.
but I would call the ADH and let them tell me what to follow up with.
It just seems like it could happen. I
It
mean,
will.
Sure.
right,
And,
right before the Battle of the Bone, when you
100%.
tell
So
the
if-
quarterback he's been,
So if it's 14 minutes and 50 seconds, yeah, I'm being silly in saying that, but somebody could make that statement. I wasn't there 15 minutes, I left 10 seconds before that. Because I was watching my watch.
At what number of cases does this fall apart where you just don't have the manpower to?
That's a question.
You know, honestly, when Mr. Woolley and I discussed this, that I was gonna be the POC, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, we thought that I could spend an hour or so a day on this job and be done. Well, I've already trumped all that, you know, and it's, that's when we decided to bring the assistant principals into it. And there's some districts that are hiring outside POCs, which we do not like because of zero contact with the Alma School District, you know, but there's larger school districts are doing it. We do have a little bit of a plan that if we get overwhelmed, we've got some ideas, the school nurses can help, the assistant principals can help. We have some district level people that could come in and help if we need to. But right now, myself and the 4 assistant principals, we think we can start that way. But the problem is the assistant principals are fixing to be bombarded with regular day work. But that's okay. You know,
Yeah, assistant principals are expendable, you know.
But the truth is, you know, I'm okay with sharing my cell phone. My first call on Sunday was at 6:20, my text, and it ended later that night about 11:30 that night. So it wasn't constant all day, and I'm okay with that because the point is the communication has to get out there because we have a lot of parents that aren't understanding the rules. But once they hear me say these are the rules, they feel better about why we're not quarantining their kids. And that's what I asked. I mean, we had 2 anonymous parents call the ADH and said, Mr. Biggs didn't do this correct. Now, I didn't really agree with that. Call me and let me explain what I did, and then if I don't do it right, call them and get on to me. But they didn't know the 48-hour time. So that, you know, call me and I'll tell you. And then if you don't agree, then you can call the board or call somebody and say, hey, they didn't do this right. But let me explain the rules. And I think, and the word ignorance is not a right word to say out loud, but they just don't know the rules.
Uninformed.
Yeah, uninformed. And after we get everybody informed, then I think we're going to be better off with this. So it's, and I'm going to explain one more set of this, that this makes me nervous a little bit for our school. If a positive case, if you're positive, you are now quarantined for 10 days. Possible close contact, you're quarantined for 14 days. Good job, that's what I said. So, I'm going to give you an example. We had a football player that was the positive, and he got to come back to football practice 4 days before the guys that he was his possible close contact. So I called ADH, I said, man, that doesn't make any sense. How can this happen?
Incubation.
Well, there are rules and there are regulations. They call the person that was positive, incubation period was 4 days before the test. So they already was in quarantine 4 days, they say. Well, they weren't in quarantine. But anyway, that's the rules that we're going to follow. So this really blew our mind when we started adding this up the other day. If you have I'm going to say a single parent just to get this across. If I'm a single mother with a 6, 7-year-old kid, and the single mother is positive, the single mother is 10 days quarantine. Well, the 6-year-old daughter is also on 14 days quarantine because she was a direct contact with the mom. 14 days starts whenever you're the last contact with your positive patient. So as the mom, I got to continue to take care of my kid. So the 10 days are over. So the mom is now clear, but now the young girl starts 14 days from there because that was the last contact. So our kid would be home 24 days from the first initial time. That's the rules. So that's going to bring up some information conflict along the way, but that is the rules. I want to make this clear, and I had Coach Lockridge had a meeting in here yesterday, day before, with all the head coaches. I made it very clear to them. If you're the starting quarterback, if you're the starting right-hand pitcher, if you're the starting point guard, and we have a game on day 13, you're not playing. I will follow the 14 days to a T. Do not call me and say, hey, it's 13 days, we're going to let them play. No, we're not. We're following the 14, we're following the ADH guidelines exactly. So anybody upset is the ADH guidelines that we have followed. And we have to be that. We have to be consistent across the board. If not, we're going to have all kinds of stuff going in different directions. So we will be consistent regardless if it's a teacher, a student, a parent, whatever it might be. We're going to be consistent with our protocol because it's the ADH guidelines.
I would quickly add to that, Travis alluded to it, that's the guidelines on Thursday night at 6:25. That may not be the guidelines by 10 o'clock tomorrow. How many times would you say things have changed? 20? That something has changed. I don't have any
And
reason.
Let me say that, the thing that I've respected about ADH, we'll call them and talk to them about something on a Zoom, and somebody will bring up a question, and they'll say, we didn't think about that. So they're learning this too, and I respect that. But the best thing about it is we're getting all this ironed out before August 24th. And that's really going to help all of us be more consistent with knowing the rules and understanding the rules. And again, when the community gets the rules understood, they're going to respect our decision more because they understand the true rules. And it's all the ADH. I mean, that's what we're going to follow, and we're going to really and truly try our hardest to do it exactly by the book. Because in a situation like this, you can't. You cannot fluctuate in different ways. You've got to do it by the book.
John, back to your question a minute ago about what happens when we have a lot of cases. I would like to think that when that happens, we'll be directed to close. Now, you know, the governor has said, and I don't have any inside information about this, I'm just telling you what I heard at 1:30 on afternoons. He had been pretty consistent, so, you know, not even discussing the possibility of closing up until, 3 or 4 days ago. And now 2 or 3 times he has alluded to, well, if a school district, a single school district, or a county, or a part of the state all of a sudden spikes up, then we could just look at that. I think I was glad to hear him say that. Again, I'm just repeating what I heard him say publicly. But I took that to say that if a district started having a lot of cases, that they would look at closing just that district. And let me remind you, I don't and you don't have that authority right now to decide if we do or don't have school. There's one guy in Arkansas that has that authority.
I've got a couple questions that I wrote down to just clarification for me, but I think they'd be good for
Sure.
people to hear. So these are not gotcha questions, I promise you. We're all learning as we go here. But 2 of them I've thought of here while you've been talking. The 10-day positive before you come back, or 14-day, is there a requirement to provide a negative test result for that? Or
I'll say this, in the past, the answer was yes, but now there's no. When the ADH, they will send a release form to the patient and then the patient, that was one of the things that we asked for in the Zoom. Because originally, they were just going to send it to the patient. And we were not going to be notified when the student could come back to school. So that was one of the things in the Zoom that we required for them to change. Because if I thought today was 14th, they could come back, and they show up on the 13th, and Mr. Wolf sees them in the hallway and said, no, you can't be here today. Well, the kid said, yeah, I can. Well, so that was one of the things that changed. So we will be notified by and I've got emails already that says this kid is free on this time. But the negative test is not. It's only the days, the amount of quarantine time is when it counts. So the negative test means nothing.
So if a kid, especially an older, high school age kid, day 14 comes and they still feel like they've got symptoms or whatever, I mean, we don't want them back in school, and there's going to be no pushback from the district.
Oh, yes.
They're not there.
We, of course, if the health department says they can come back, then they can come back. But if we think they're sick, we'll start the process all over again immediately.
We have that, there's that authority there?
Sure.
Or if they're a minor, is it up to the parent?
Well, let's just say, let's change your scenario just a little bit. Let's say the student has not been home, has not been diagnosed, has not been quarantined. He's just a student in school today, and we've told our teachers this, or maybe we're going to tell them if we haven't had that meeting yet, you know, it's up to all of us to be on the watch for a student that we think might be sick. And our nurses have been well-trained to be able to determine, is this child is he just got a cold, or is it something more than that? And now, we can't require a test. We can require that the parent come get them and take them home. We do that all the time, just routinely.
What
So-
happens at that? If my kids at school test 101 fever, is it still just the 24 hours no fever? Or do we require, I mean,
What happens if they sit in the nurse's office for 15 minutes? Is the nurse then?
There's another point we'll come back to in a minute.
Okay.
We cannot require a test. We don't have that authority. All we can do is to help the parent understand that's really important. Now, one thing that's getting ready to happen, I don't think it quite has yet, the state bought 200 rapid, what's the word I want?
antigen?
Antigen testing machines, which give you the result in 30 minutes. They're going to be in the health department, the county health units, and schools have first priority at them. So if we had a student that we thought might be positive, we would encourage the parent to right then go to the health department and get a test. Now, we can't make them, but I think most parents would.
And we will not be testing without permission. I've been
Oh,
asked
we won't be
that, of
testing at all.
course.
We don't have any testing machines. We don't have any authority to give a test. We won't be testing under any shape, form, or fashion, ever.
And whether it's good or bad or right or wrong or whatever, there's no authority to require a negative test to come
That's
back to
correct.
school. Okay.
That's correct.
So going back to the 15 minutes,
Yeah. Well, let me go somewhere else for a second,
Okay.
where you were just a second ago. So we have this student that teacher says, why don't you go see the nurse? And the nurse says, I think your parent needs to come get you. We have set up in every school a quarantine room where a child can wait for the parent out of the nurse's office and away from everybody else. It varies depending on the campus. The circumstances are a little bit different, but we have a place where the student can be supervised, of course, but by themselves, where they won't be around other people until the parent can get here to get them. For that very reason, if they turn out to be infected, we sure don't want them around other people waiting on mom to get here.
okay.
And to go along with that, we also have a new air filter machine
Yeah.
in each one of those rooms that is the same machine that's in surgery rooms. So it'll be the cleanest place in the school district. And the other thing of that is, just to go along, if we think a student came out of A1, that night we put that machine in A1 to clean that air as well.
That's good.
Well, go ahead, Chapin.
Well, I've got a third grader this year, so asking from a third grade perspective on the 15-minute rule. Say one of her classmates was to test positive, or the teacher, worst case. Are we expecting third graders to have not gotten within 6 foot of each other so what happens there?
The best answer there is I actually spoke to the intermediate school today about this. Seating charts, playing charts, group charts, however we can separate, so we can make sure, even if there are 20 kids in a group.
If your child is sitting on the first row in the room, and we figured this out at 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock, that maybe that there's a child on the back row of the room that's infected, your child, the two probably hadn't been anywhere close to each other. Now, as the day goes on, that becomes a different issue. But, where were they, how close were they to each other at lunch? How close were they to each other at recess? Those are all things that are going to be heavily dependent on our staff to police, to know, to keep up with, to watch. The bottom line is, we're going to do everything we can to keep them apart all the time. And if, is that possible? Well, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to try to do that.
So expanding on one student what is the current protocol for a classroom or a grade or a school perhaps closing, and how does that affect the rest of the district?
And to add to that was my next question, is if student test, where does it end from class to teacher to grade, building, and also if the student has an older sibling or younger sibling in a different school.
That's the toughest part of the tracer. The tracer has to do all kinds of in-depth interviews to say, all right, give me your seating chart, that'll be my first start. And then where did this kid eat at lunch? And I'll go to that chart. And we got video cameras. I mean, we really discussed that one case could take 2 days, I mean, to really investigate.
Just depending on circumstances.
Sure.
And, you know, where did they go to the bathroom? When did they do this? When did they do that?
That's gonna be-
To what you said is true. If you go to the library, then if you go to the music room, or if you go whatever, you know, you move 3 or 4 times a day. If it's a high school, 7 times a day. And I have to follow that kid out all day long to find out who he was around. So again, if I'm sitting right here and Ms. Teresa's not in my contact because I'm nobody's 6 foot around. But if we rubbed elbows for 2 minutes when a teacher was over me, helping me with math, then that's 2 or 3 minutes there. And then if they come back 30 minutes later and come help me for another 10 minutes, then I have to add that up. So we're gonna do everything we can to
Sure,
trace
and yeah,
it.
this is not a gotcha.
No, I know
This is-
that, and I respect that.
But this is our real world.
Yeah.
But should, you're second in command over a fairly good-sized school district. Do you think, I mean, this seems like it's gonna turn into a full-time job.
And as he said, that's.
Sounds like an
we-
argument.
we-
Yeah, I mean, it's.
We know that, and he is the official point of contact with the state health department.
But then putting it
But-
on our assistant principals, who I think are gonna do more work in a week than they would do in 2 or 3.
And we just don't know how this is gonna go. You know, if we need more people involved, we certainly will do that.
It is-
There's no question we will do that.
It's not
If we-
worth
If it turns
hiring.
out we have to employ some additional people to do it, we will do that, without question. John, back to what you were asking a minute ago, there is no number. I mean, you say, okay, what happens if there's 6 cases in this school, or 20? There is no number. Now, if the health department has a number, they haven't shared it. Again, these decisions all go back to the governor, as far as we know, as far as information we've been given. As I said a second ago, I would think that, you know, I don't know how you define outbreak. That's not defined in anything we've been given. But I have to think that if there was one, then, and we would be, you know, talking to the Department of Education and to the governor's office and to the health department saying, look, guys, here's what we're dealing with. Help us figure this out. We, you know, and you know, if that's if what we think is this school needs to close, or we need to close the district, we won't be bashful about saying that, but it's not our decision. All we can do is tell them that's our thinking.
Do you see a situation where one school may close and the other schools in the district remain open?
I do. I think that's, I'm not predicting that, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out.
Is there any obligation on the parents of a minor that if the parent gets sick, they call the school and say?
That's a great question. I actually had a call today that a parent said, hey, I've got it. Our kids are not in school yet, but I just wanted you to know.
Yeah,
Now, so a parent, we would love for that to happen.
sure.
Now, if not, anybody that gives a test, if Baptist Health gave a test and they found a Joe Smith positive, the Baptist Health has to report it to the ADH. And then the ADH asks Joe Smith, who do you have in your house? Who is your direct contacts?
And do you
They
have children?
school-
Are they in school? Oh, they would ask all those
If
questions.
they have school children, then they would contact us, the way we understand it. Obviously, it hadn't happened yet.
Sure.
But they would contact us to tell us that we have direct contacts in our school district. So we have to rely on other people. And we
But can they tell you who it is, if it's a minor?
To me, yes.
To you?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And, you know, Jay, that's another thing that I'm misunderstanding a little bit. When I call the ADH, obviously I have to tell them all these names. And at the beginning, they called it an emergency crisis. So emergency crisis does not mean I have to follow HIPAA or FERPA, all the laws. I could actually say some names. So when I would call, the very first time I did this, and I did it for about 3 names, and I said, I don't feel good about this, regardless if they told me I could or not. So I would call the first 3 names on my list, and I said, this is the kid that was positive. And after I did that 2 or 3 times, even though I had the permission to do that, I didn't feel right about that. Because in 23 years of education, you never say a name, you know, in anything. So I didn't feel good about that. So then I changed my answer or my quote to them. Your son or daughter was around somebody that was positive in our school district or in the football team or volleyball team, be a little bit more direct, but I would never say the name. I just felt uncomfortable about that. Now, they're back and forth a little bit on that. And because they called it an emergency, if it's an emergency, you can use names. I'm still not. I'm still not using names right now until I guess I'm told I'm supposed to. Because I just felt terrible about that.
You wouldn't want your child's name used. And you know,
I can
that's the
understand
way I always think about that, you
Yeah,
know.
if I get that phone call, I want to know how close they were.
Yeah, and we're gonna give them all the information we can.
But if
right
they
up
ask you
to
for
that.
it, would you be required to provide it then, if they ask you directly,
I
who
don't
is
know the
it?
answer. Because again, they flip-flopped on that, and I just truly don't know the answer right now. But right now, like the other day, I said, you can call the ADH, and they have everything on file. And I don't know the answer to that. I want to know the answer to that, and even if I'm uncomfortable and they tell me I need to tell them, I will. But they're flip-flopping on some rules right now. And it's, again, it's not their fault, because they're new about this too. Everybody's learning. But I won't follow their guidelines. I'll say that. And right
What's-
now, I don't know what they do.
Well, we've been getting emails, hey, there's somebody on this team and that team. I think we need a set plan in place for that, but I mean, it's gonna get down to, I mean, are we fixing to announce when the primary school special ed class that has 4 people in it? And then what if do we say the 9th grade geometry teacher? I mean, you're fixing to get in a situation where we need to have, people need knowledge, but are we gonna keep announcing?
Well, the first
I don't
couple
know
of
the right
cases we
answer.
had, I sent an email to the TV stations and the newspapers, and you all probably saw those stories on the air. This has been 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. After that, I decided, I really don't want to send it to the media. They'll find it out, without whether we send it to them or not. But I did feel like parents would want to know. I didn't want to put us in the position of it looking like we were hiding something from the public. And I think that's an important point. I don't want our public to ever feel like that we're withholding information that they would like to know, if it's information we can give out. At the same time, Carrie, I agree with your point entirely. There is that fact that every time, and Monday or Tuesday night, lose track, I sent an email to our parents, to every parent in the school district, about a case. Now, I did not send those emails or make that contact to the media because in those cases, the students happened to be athletes. That had nothing to do with it. I'd have done the same thing if it had been a 2nd grader. They just happened to be an athlete. And so since they're already on campus, I thought it appropriate to state that it was a volleyball player or a football player or whatever the case was. I have very mixed feelings about that going forward, and I would welcome your thoughts on that. Do we or do we not? Because as I've said many times, in this business, every decision you make, somebody's going to disagree with. That's a fact. And this will be one of those. There'll be people that will be critical if we don't disclose it. There'll be people that will be critical if we do. We're kind of caught in the middle on this one.
I think it's a tough call. I'd love to hear what other people think. It just may get into some very smaller groups or,
And if that happens, we can always back up and just simply say a primary school student, rather than getting it any narrower than that, or a 3rd grade student, or a whatever student.
Yeah, but you say 3rd grader, and my wife's gonna call you and say, who is it, what
Right.
class, who's the teacher? And be justified, I think.
Right,
So-
could we put it as
Because
a link on the website?
if it's the back row student in my daughter's class that is tested positive, my front row student won't be there the next day, I can promise you that.
And can I
So-
say this, one of the things that we said
That's a good
with the
point.
football team, that was the first group, is Coach Bush or Miss Patty or Coach Lockridge, whoever got a phone call, their answer to them, if Mr. Biggs did not contact you, you're not in that procedure protocol. Now,
but
Still
back
wanna
row,
know.
front row of the
You bet.
same.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at.
Is it worth calling everybody in a class and saying, I don't feel like you meet the guidelines, so you're not required, you know? I don't envy that, your position in that.
But back to the other
Yeah,
point
that's- I
where we
mean-
were a minute ago. We're under no obligation to make any kind of announcement about a positive case, not from the health department, not from anywhere. Are we under any obligation to tell anybody except the people that are involved in the case, the positive person and any direct contacts that we need to contact?
Do we
We don't
need
have to
a-
tell anybody.
And
Do
what if
we
in
need a
there-
policy on it?
What if in that, instead of announcing it district-wide, that it was a basketball player, football player, whatever, if it's a third grade student, you email that class and say, a student in your child's class has tested positive. If it's a football player, you email the football team, a football player has tested positive.
I can go with that, but let's take that to real world. What if it's a high school student that in the course of their day, they're in 7 different classes, and probably in the course of the day, they're with 150
Sure.
different students?
And maybe at high school and even middle school, it's grade level, but at least in third grade, you know that this class was together
Yeah.
all day long.
And you need that boilerplate language that says, but if you have not been contacted directly by the school, you're not in the safety
Yeah.
protocol, you need that at the bottom of the email, right?
Maybe learning community, I mean, it can keep going, but
Yes, yeah.
I don't know.
At least in the younger schools, it'd be easier to group that together.
I think we can do that. And again, I'm not trying to talk you all into or out of anything or defend this or that. I'm not sure the right way to do this. I believe in disclosure. You all know that. I believe in the public knowing what we're doing. It was my idea to live stream the meetings. I think that's an important thing. But this is a little bit different situation.
And I will say that we handled the first case different than we handled the second case. We're trying to learn what is best. So we're still learning it.
And we
I
don't.
agree with Sean. I think if we can email a group, we'd figure out what that group is.
Right.
And then say, if you are not directly contacted by the school district, then you are not in the protocol.
Sure.
And I think we can do that pretty easily, right, principals? You can segregate down to a small group of students' emails pretty easily? Yeah,
Or just ask the teacher, you know.
yeah.
And I
Well,
will say this too, the first case, obviously, my phone was on all over the place, so what we decided, I emailed Coach Bush a little email, and I said, please pass this on to your parents. And it said more or less what Sean just said, is that if we didn't contact you, or a student, a football player was positive, Mr. Biggs contacted 12 people that was in the protocol procedure situation, and if he did not contact you, then you're not in it, or whatever.
well,
Obviously, it
that,
was a lot better than that.
So I think that's good, because that gives you two things. That gives you some information you're disseminating, so you're not hiding anything, and then it gives reassurance to people that, hey, there's a positive test, my kid might have been in that situation, but hey, if they hadn't called me, it's not in that protocol.
that's
So
the way
I think
we'll,
that's
that's the
pretty
way
good.
we'll proceed at this point. Now, things may change and we may feel like we need to do different, and we'll certainly consider that if that comes up. But we will, going forward, we will contact the class, the grade, the team, the whatever is the appropriate group to contact.
And we were at the city council meeting this week, and so I know we're encouraging parents to do drop-off to kind of cut down on our bus numbers. Where are we at on like trying to figure out how the traffic is just not an absolute disaster?
Yeah, couple of things on that. First of all, we don't know how many people are going to bring their children that normally ride the bus. I'm not sure that's going to be a big number because most of the people that ride the bus, they ride the bus because they don't have that option. Parents don't have that option.
Right.
For work or whatever reason. But I'm sure there'll be some. But at the same time, we've got, a whole bunch of kids that aren't coming to school at all. So I'm wondering if those two things will offset themselves. We won't know until we start.
We're just going to see what happens, okay.
But even with that said, we're preparing for the eventuality of more cars. We have modified the dismissal time. Morning's not a problem because it staggers out over quite a period of time. Afternoon is when it already can jam up. We are changing our parent pickup times at the middle school and intermediate school, high school, primary school and intermediate school. We're changing our pickup times, getting it further away from the bus time. We're going to do parent pickup a little bit earlier. We're, at the primary school in particular, see, at the primary school, and intermediate school too for that matter, but it's not as big a deal as the intermediate school, a lot of parents historically have walked in the building to get their child and then parked their car, walked in. We're not letting parents in the building, period. So that's out the window. They have to get in the line and pick them up. The primary school, we're going to split the school in the middle by alphabetical last name. And the one line that's there now, it will be the same, and then we're going to have a second line inside the fence, in the parking lot area, because there shouldn't be anybody parked there because they can't park and come in, or very few cars parked there. We think that'll work, and that'll run simultaneously, and we'll have obviously more staff out there managing that with radios and all that. We think that'll work. And again, it's one of those things we won't know for sure till we get there, and we'll adjust as we need to. But we certainly have considered that.
Well, we're 6 days out from Great Start. I mean, do parents know what time this pickup's gonna be yet? I mean, what time's school getting out if we've changed it?
I do not know whether they've been told that yet or not, but if they haven't, they will, I'm assuming that was in the letters that they're getting right now about the start of school, the traditional start of school letter that we mail to everybody. I'm sure that information is in that. Some of those just went in the mail today, so they may not have gotten them yet, but I think by now, is everything mailed as far as y'all know? Today. They will be getting, they'll have that information.
I mean, has anybody else ever waited in the line at the primary school?
Oh, I have. I've gone in and waited in the line.
How's that waiting in the line gone for you?
Well, I fell asleep one day and they had to wake me up. But.
I mean, I really worry we're talking, I mean, I've done it
So
twice
the
and
primary
literally.
Primary school's pretty good. They got radios, they recognize you, they send the kid out. The primary school is probably one of our better, well-oiled machines. From Ramona in the morning to the parents in the afternoon, or the teachers in the afternoon.
People moving, but.
Our biggest problem is at the middle school.
Yes.
That's just see, the middle school will be improved by the primary school moving earlier, so that we don't have that much more, we'll get some of that traffic, most of the primary school traffic will be gone before the middle school dismisses.
David, have you been getting any calls from kindergarten parents wanting to bring their kids in for the first day?
Yes. I wish Sean was here to discuss that, and I'll try to wing it. What we told all of the primary schools, I'm not sure I'm answering the question you're asking, so if I'm not, back up for me. Primary school, because they're young children, because in many cases it's their first or second year they ever go to school. We invited, we just didn't feel like having a normal open house and having a building full of adults all together was a smart move. So we invited primary school to open house, if you will, by appointment with their teacher, the child, the parents, and their teacher, and a period of time that just them came in the building, went straight to the classroom, met with the teacher, had open house. And I think a high number of the primary school students did that. It worked very well.
I think he's gonna talk about walking in on the first
They
day.
did, and they're not satisfied. They're worried about the first
They're
day.
not gonna be able to.
I've gotten cornered on
I've
that
gotten a
issue.
couple.
Yeah.
They want to come in the first day?
Kindergarten only. I think at primary school, it's the kindergarten parents who are.
And hopefully, Great Start, we're still having Great Start for them next week. Hopefully, that will alleviate that. And again, I say again, it doesn't matter what we decide, there's going to be some people
Sure.
disagree with it. I know that.
But
But we just, to let that many adults in the building all at once is just really scary to us from a spread standpoint.
Yeah.
Are we checking temps?
I'm sorry?
Are we checking temps when kids?
We are not. We're asking staff, employees, to either check their temperature at home or when they get to school with our thermometer, if they don't have a thermometer or running late or whatever. We are not requiring that of students. Now, parents are encouraged to do that. That's in all of our literature. Take your child's temperature, but we can't know whether they did or not, obviously. And the first thing we will do if a teacher, the nurse, a secretary, anybody thinks that a child doesn't look right, flushed, not acting right, first thing we'll do is check their temperature. How many thermometers did we buy?
About 55.
So we've got plenty of no-touch thermal thermometers to have plenty in each school. So We will do it as needed. I don't know of any school that, around here at least, that they're taking everybody's temperature every morning. That becomes quite an ordeal to try to do.
I got one last question, and it's if a teacher tests positive and they've got the 10 or 14-day period, are they required to use vacation days?
No.
What is the protocol there?
This gets a little complicated, and I'll try to keep it simple. The governor, just 2 or 3 days ago, and we have not gotten anything in writing about this yet, but he announced this publicly, so I'm sure it's real. He allocated $20 million to pay for teachers being off work for this purpose, for 14 days, 14 calendar days, 2 weeks, 10 work days. That we don't know the mechanism, how that's going to work yet. That hadn't been sent out. But I think what it'll be is we'll file some kind of a form saying that so-and-so was off work and it was for this reason. And it cost the district this much in substitute or whatever it is. We'll send that in and then we'll get reimbursed for that. It will never cost a teacher pay or sick leave. After that, if let's say some teacher gets really sick and they're in the hospital, they're out off work for who knows how long. That's the first 2 weeks, what I was just talking about. After that, and this is just a decision I made, we're not going to dock somebody's pay or sick leave for this reason. We're just not going to do it. I just don't feel like that's the right thing to do. We'll work it out. We'll if we have to hire a sub, if somebody has to have a sub, that's what we'll do. But we're not gonna cost that teacher pay or sick leave. We're just not going to do it. One scenario we've been talking about, what if a teacher has to quarantine? They're not sick, but they have to quarantine because their husband was sick. Their husband was a positive case. We like the idea, again, we'll have to see whether this will work or not, for them to still teach their class from home because they're the teacher. Because they're not sick, they just can't be out where other people are. Teach their class remotely from home. We would, depending on not depending on the age of the child, we would always have to already have a substitute in the room just for student supervision. But the substitute would kind of function as a teaching assistant with the teacher teaching remotely. I think that'll happen. I think we'll have teachers that'll get quarantined and they're not sick. And I'd rather have that teacher teaching remotely than not teaching at all.
To go with that, I've had multiple teachers ask me, they have children in the district, is if their child either has to quarantine or is sick.
Same thing.
They're the primary one to stay with them. So
Same thing. Actually, the CARES Act addressed that, and we're just taking it a step further. The CARES Act, after this state thing that I was talking about, the CARES Act rule kicks in. And for the next 2 weeks, whether they were sick themselves, or quarantined themselves, or sick themselves, or had to care for a child or an elderly parent that was infected or quarantined, the CARES Act says that that's on us, that we can't dock their pay or make them use sick leave. Now, I'm going to take that as far as we have to take it, but that's in the CARES Act.
So even the 10-day, if the sick child is 14 days and the child's fine, better, then they've still got 10 more days past that to stay home to quarantine themselves. But no teacher should stress over losing or having to burn every vacation day, sick day they've got.
It's not going to happen.
Okay. I think there'll be plenty of teachers that are going to be glad to hear that. 'Cause I've been asked that
And again,
multiple
some of this information like this, remember, teachers just came back to work today.
Yes.
And we hadn't had a chance to meet with them and give them all this information yet. Now, we've sent a lot of it to them in emails, but that's not the same as me standing up in front of the room with them listening and saying it, here's how we're going to do this.
Can I add that if a teacher is home with a sick child or a sick husband, we're not forcing them to teach remotely.
No.
That's an option. If a teacher's home, they can teach remotely, but we're not forcing them to teach remotely.
We're going to do that if it makes sense and it works.
If they're like quarantined.
Yeah.
And if they choose, yeah.
And, there's some situations where that will work better than others, depending on the grade and the subject.
What about substitutes? How are we looking? I've heard some districts are really struggling to get
Well, we've
substitutes.
always, historically, we've always been blessed to have lots of subs. Every school, every assistant principal, every teacher for that matter, has their favorites. That they just kind of, if they just kind of fall into a groove that this person knows this routine, knows our routine, and that's always kind of becomes the go-to people. We have several subs. I don't know a number
We had
that
35 come to the training for new subs.
that's new.
And we asked that they choose 2 schools to sub at, so that they weren't, bouncing around to different buildings.
And that's probably in addition to 50 subs, people that subbed last year that will again this year. So we should be in great shape. Who knows? But that's what we're thinking.
Yeah, some more
Well, let's go back to the kindergarten. What's Great Start Kindergarten look like? Are they going to be able to walk their kid to the front door? And I mean, because I got lots of questions about that from a handful of kindergarten mothers. What's our vision of Great Start Kindergarten?
We don't have any.
I have not discussed it with Sean and Deanne, no.
Again, it's finding that balance point, walking that fine line. On the one hand, we want parents to feel comfortable about their child coming to school. That's really important. On the other hand, we want to try to keep people from infecting each other.
I recognize we're in unprecedented times. I do.
Historically, Great Start is a student day, not a student and parent day. What we have said ongoing, first day of school forward, is parents can walk their student to the door, and we'll take them from the door on in. Great Start, and quite honestly, even maybe longer than that, we're going to have to be more lenient than that. We're going to have to, we can't let the parent come in and stay all morning for Great Start. We can't do that.
And also, local daycares are not allowing parents in.
Yeah.
They can go to the door.
I mean, I've seen Miss Ramon appeal, a little kindergartner away from the parent. I mean, I've seen it.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid on the first day, it might be rather more dramatic.
We're going to have to be, we're going to have to be reasonable. We're going to have to not be unreasonable about that. That's all I know to say. And we'll kind of do it as a whatever we have to do to make it work basis.
We've told Miss Rona she can't hug every kid that comes by now.
Yeah, I know. We might need to give her a hazmat suit just so she can.
Yeah. What about face shields? Have those come in yet?
Say again?
Face shields?
Yeah, we've got them.
Okay.
The face shields, we have 357 employees total, so we've got a face shield for every person. But face shields do not replace face masks. But and I'll say that, and I said it to the teachers today, we're going to provide you with every safety PPE that you want, but the face mask is the only thing that has to happen.
The reason we bought the shields, particularly in the lower grades, if you're teaching phonics, it's important if the child can see your mouth. I mean, you got to do that. So you got to take your mask off. So, and this is, the official health department statement on masks is a teacher can take them off if circumstances require them to, or words to that effect. And teaching phonics is certainly one of those. The child has to be able to see the teacher's lips. So, not to leave it off all day, obviously, but to do what we have to do to have school. Same thing, we told the bus drivers the same thing. Those of you that wear glasses know what happens with your glasses and a mask. It's easy to fog your glasses. We've told the drivers, have your mask on when students are walking past you, getting on and off the bus. When you're driving down the road, if you have a problem with your glasses fogging, take your mask off and use the face shield. So that we don't want to take any chances with safety because the glasses are fogged up.
On the mask, when people
Scenarios.
can social
many.
distance, you can have a child and teacher could have their mask off, correct?
Let's take an example of, this is an easier example to use. Let's say it's a high school AP physics class with 5 students in it, in a regular sized classroom. Well, if they spread out, they wouldn't need to wear a mask at all in that class because they would be easily more than 6 feet apart even though they're together for the whole period. In many of our cases, here's another example, there's a lot of things in our dyslexia therapy and in special education that it's one-on-one. A lot of the things that we do are one-on-two. We've built plexiglass shields for those cases, which is an approved thing. They're just on a tabletop stand, plexiglass shields. Some of our teachers, and we've asked them to let us approve this, but a number of our teachers have built plexiglass shields for their desk or for student desks. And I have a great number that have done that, but several have. We have to be a little careful about that. The fire marshal got involved statewide with that about fire safety and kids not having something. Some school somewhere was hanging plastic sheeting from the ceiling, floor to ceiling. Well, that would be a fire hazard if there was a fire getting out the door. We don't have anybody doing that, but all those kinds of things are okay. There'll be many times during the day that students can take their masks off. Obviously, when they're eating, you can't eat with your mask on. Now, they'll have it on in the cafeteria, but not at the actual time they're eating. Masks can be off for physical activity, which would include recess, as long as they maintain distancing. You know, little kids like to hug each other. You can't go do that with your mask on. You just can't do that. So, you know, all those kinds of things. There'll be many, many times during the day, whether you're 5 years old or 18 years old, that you're going to be able to take your mask off. It's not going to be put it on when you leave the house and take it off when you get back to the house.
At some point, once we get off of the school classroom experience, I'd like to pivot to what remote or blended looks like.
That's on my list.
From both the
Yep.
student and the teacher's perspective.
Are we ready to move on to that now?
Yeah.
Let me kind of tell you what the setup is, I guess is the word. And it's different depending on the age of the children, for obvious reasons. And you all jump in if I say something wrong. The high school and middle school are doing it about the same way, not much different. Let's say I'm a 10th grade world history teacher, or a 7th grade science teacher, or anything else in high school and middle school. But let's talk about a 10th grade world history teacher. I normally have 6 classes of world history that I teach. That's my normal day in the past. It looks like we're going to have, and there's obviously variation here, but we're going to have around 50 students per grade not at school, either blended or remote. So that teacher, instead of having 6 classes of students in front of them, will have 5 classes of students in front of them. And one of their periods, they'll still be teaching world history, but to a group of students that are at home. Let me interrupt that, and I should have started with this, and go through the definitions of the terms, because, you know, we tried to make this as understandable as we could, but it's still, I know it's confusing. At school is obvious. You're at school. Remote learning is, I'm going to be at home. Learning, being connected with an Alma teacher, being taught by an Alma teacher. Blended is a combination of those two. I'm going to be at home for some things, but come to school for some things. Quite honestly, the majority of our blended students, I believe, they marked blended because they want to come to school for athletic period, or for ROTC, or for band, or something like that. They're probably not coming for algebra. They're coming for a co-curricular activity. I don't know that. That's just my opinion. So, and then the 4th category is the Airedale Online Academy, where through all we do with that is process some paperwork, where they are using they're totally not involved with Alma School District, not being taught by an Alma teacher, but are very similar to what many people do in homeschool. That they are working directly for or with a third-party private company that's providing their entire education. We don't have very many of those. I would say when it's all said and done, it'll be 5 or 10, 5 to 10, somewhere in there. Very, 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 very few. When it was all said and done, that's what they really want to do. And I won't be surprised if that number even drops some more. So back to the other. So that would be the setup. We basically, on middle school and high school, there's basically 2 teachers teaching each subject, whether it's 10th grade world history, or whether it's 7th grade science, or 6th grade language arts. There's basically 2 teachers. They would each be operating this way. They would have classes of students, very, very typical of what they have all the time. Then they would have a group of students that are remote learners or blended learners that they're responsible for, and they have a period of the day to do that. Now, that's not to say during that period every day, all those students get online and they have class. That's not saying that at all. That might happen some, but that won't be the norm. That won't be the way class is had. The way class will typically be done is that world history teacher will, the world history teacher essentially teaches the same thing several times a day, over and over and over, different classes, same material, same syllabus, same course. At some time during the day, they're going to start their Chromebook or their laptop computer recording in Google Classroom and record the class. Record that 55-minute class period with students in the room. And then save that on Google Classroom, which is what all of our people use. They're all familiar with it, students and staff. And then that will be that student's world history lesson for that day. Sometimes they will, the teachers may say, hey, let's all get together at 2:30 this afternoon or 10:30 this morning, or whenever that period is for that teacher, and let's check on things. One of the ways to do this is the teacher may say, hey, at 10 o'clock every morning, I'm going to be online. And if you have questions or need help or don't know what you're supposed to do or didn't find the lesson, I'm going to be online at 10 o'clock every morning during that period that I was talking about. And you can get online and we can do whatever we need to do. That's basically the way it's going to work on the secondary schools. You all want to add anything?
I thought that's exactly where our plan is. I think it's spot on. Perfect.
And we think that will work very well. The elementary schools, of course, obviously are a little bit different. Kim, why don't you just talk through that instead of me? You can probably do it better than I can.
Okay, so I talked earlier about how important it's going to be for the teachers to contact the parents now that they have their class list. And so a lot of the work of the intermediate school teachers will be dictated by who's going to be in the classroom at what time and what their schedule looks like. So it works a little bit of the same way. We have a lot more flexibility, obviously, at intermediate school because we don't have class periods and those kids are with the same teacher all day long. So there's going to be a couple of ways that the teacher contacts remote students. They will use some of their planning time. We are also building in some time in the schedule weekly to cover their class so that they could set up time to meet with certain children. We're looking at, there's going to be other times of the day where students might be working independently, perhaps on Lincoln Learning, which is one of our digital resources, that teacher might be able to do a remote group within the classroom. In addition, there are going to be some times of day, like maybe connections teaching, that a student, if they wanted to, could remote into the classroom and watch, the 20-minute connections piece. But most of the time, they will get their instruction from a recorded video that the teacher has done or that we've uploaded from Lincoln Learning, or most likely a combination of those things. So it's not quite as cut and dry at the intermediate school because it's really going to depend on what the kiddo needs and what that looks like as far as the parent schedule. We're going to have some parents. I've got a kid that's going to be a remote student and he's not going to be staying in the state, but he is going to have an Alma teacher for the next month because he needs to go stay with his grandparents. So, his schedule's going to look a whole lot different than somebody who is at home for a different reason. So we're going to be able to work that into teacher schedules. And there's probably gonna have to be some adjustments once we actually work the plan, but we feel pretty confident, that the best thing to do for our teachers is to make sure they all have the skills to go remote, whether that's with 5 kids or whether that's with 25 kids, in a month from now. And we feel just as strongly that it's important for those kids that are 3rd through 5th graders to have one teacher that they have a relationship with, that they're going to start to develop that relationship with on August 24th, whether they're a remote kid or an online kid. And on paper, it does look a lot easier to just assign a teacher to do a section of 3rd grade remote. But I think as we've kind of talked through that today, that's not really gonna work, because we're gonna have teachers that are gonna have to remotely teach, and kids that are gonna get quarantined, and really everybody needs to know how to do the remote teaching in our building. And kids also need to know how to access the curriculum remotely. So that's those are the 2 main reasons we set it up that way.
And that's another, she brings up a very important point. We know that we're going to have students that get quarantined. We know that's going to happen. With this model, they don't change teachers when they're at home being quarantined. They're still with the same teacher at all levels, at all grade levels. They're still with the same teacher. You got to look at it both ways. One of 2 things is going to happen. And this you can count on. One of 2 things is going to happen. Either in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, the governor's going to direct us all to go home. Or that's not going to happen. We're going to continue to have school all year perhaps, just like we're going to start. One of those 2 things is going to happen. If we all go home, then our students will already have a relationship with the teacher. Our teachers will already be in the remote teaching mode. They'll already know what they're doing and how to do it. If we don't go home, that's going to, if we don't go home, it's going to because the case count continues to go down. Arkansas continues to look better. And when that happens, we're going to have students that start out at home that decide to come to school. I don't think there's any question about that. They don't have to change teachers. They already have a relationship with the teacher. They already are a member of a class, even though they're not at school. They're already part of a class. They just come right in, don't miss a lick. Another point of that is, and we've told this to parents, I hope they're hearing us say it. If I have my child at home in remote learning and he wants to come every Friday morning to school, we're good with that. And he goes right into that class that he's a member of. Or whether maybe he wants to come Tuesday and Thursday all day, whatever the parent decides, we're good with that. There's nothing as good as the child being in the classroom with the teacher. Nothing can replace that. So we want to do everything we can to make it as easy and as attractive as possible for that to happen. So those are the reasons why behind this structure. We think it'll work. Is it perfect? Well, no, of course not. It's absolutely not perfect. So will it be flawless? No. Will it have hiccups? Sure.
So,
But one more time, and then I'll be quiet. May we 2-3 weeks from now decide we got to start all over and figure out something else? Sure, we might.
great. So you mentioned, obviously, there's no substitute for that in-person interaction. How do we ensure parents that a virtual experience is going to look more like an in-person instruction experience? And then the second part of that question would be, I've heard conflicting reports on if the school district does go full virtual, is there or is there not an expectation that teachers would be required to teach from their classroom in a virtual manner?
No, we've not told anybody that.
I've heard that as well. I've
No.
heard multiple teachers. They're concerned that if we get shut down, that they still have to come to school. And their biggest concern is that means their kids are going to be home with them. What do
No.
they do with their kids
No.
then?
We have, now, that has been discussed, but we've not made any announcement about that. What we kind of talked about, and again, we've not, we'll make that decision when the time comes. What we did talk about is if after, last spring, last April and May, nobody, I mean, we were closed. We were supposed to have the doors locked, padlocked, and nobody at school. That's what they said. Our teachers had to sneak in to get stuff out of their classrooms that they needed. We certainly let them sneak in. Some of our teachers didn't have very good internet service at home just because of where they lived or for whatever reason. many of our teachers, well, some of you all want to throw a number on this, a number of teachers that on their own came and worked in their classroom to do their teaching. Anybody want to throw a number on that? No? Okay. But we had teachers do that. What we have in mind, and again, we've not really had a serious discussion about this. I don't know why this became a topic among teachers, because I just don't know. Maybe they heard it from other districts. I don't know.
Mr. Woolley, I will say we have discussed it in our building, but that's because it's been teacher-led conversations. Like,
Okay.
they want to come in, or they want the option to be able to come in and use their classroom to teach their kids. So we hope that for the teachers who want to do that they'll be able to do that. That's what,
Yeah.
they were not able to do that last semester, but we sure hope that that they get the choice, so that, because as you can imagine, it's a lot easier for some of them to
And-
teach in a classroom where all of their supplies are.
Unless the governor and the health department tells us we're prohibited from doing that, we plan to allow teachers to do that. You ask about their own children. If I'm a teacher and I've got a 8-year-old, well, that 8-year-old needs to be doing their schoolwork. So bring them with you and put them on the other side of the room doing their schoolwork while you're teaching. Another thing we talked about is we've got quite a number of instructional assistants. Maybe we kind of group them together and have one of those instructional assistants supervise the teacher's children while they're teaching, something like that. But we're not going to require that. I have no plans to tell teachers, you got to be at school at 8 o'clock Monday through Friday.
And what about the video instruction versus just, sending out assignments for kids to navigate on their own? Is there going to be an emphasis toward?
I'm not sure I follow your point.
Like a teacher instructing via video in a pre-recorded lesson versus just sending out assignments on that subject?
Okay.
Did you address I
You
think,
know,
and the root of that question is, I think, the parents that I speak to, there's a lot of concern in what virtual learning is going to look like.
We've tried to emphasize, and until we start, it's difficult to really make this point. This will be very different from what last April and May was in terms, we were told by the Department of Education, no new material. And I think that was a wrong decision on their part. But last spring, we were told to tell teachers, no new material, don't do that. So we ended up doing a lot of busy work, quite honestly. We can't do that. We can't let that happen. We have to keep moving forward. So to specifically answer your question, I think what students at home are going to see the most is their teacher teaching the class. Is there going to be some, hey, do this assignment? Well, we do that in class every day. Not every day. We do that in class routinely. That's part of teaching school is, I need, open your book to chapter 17 and read it and write a summary of it. There'll be, that kind of thing happens. That's part of school. So it will be. But then the next day, the teacher leads a discussion about that. And that will be the student at home. Again, it's going to vary. There may be times where those students at home log on to Google Classroom and are part of that discussion in real time. Or other times, they may watch the class discussion of that. And then the teacher may ask those students, tell me what you thought about what the class had to say about this. And I'm just picking a kind of an example of how that kind of thing might go. We have to proceed with education. We can't be in a holding pattern. We can't. That just can't happen.
And what about especially for younger students? How will the parents know what the expectations of that student are, and like a task list?
Up through
these are the things that need to be given.
K through 5, we're going to give the parents, the students, Google Classroom login information. The parent can log in and see what the student is doing, is supposed to be doing, has done, anytime they want to. They can also that way, if they choose to, communicate with the teacher that way. They certainly can always email the teacher. Hey, Johnny's not doing anything. What's he supposed to be doing?
Having gone through that in March, April, and May, that's the only way it works, because my second grader had no idea how to use Google Classroom. You could hand her a computer and she could play games and do this, but when you said, print this, do that, I mean, she didn't know how to do that. She's never used a computer to do that. And I
Yeah.
know some kids do this, but most probably don't. But it's a lot of work. Come home from working all day, both parents, and then print this, do that, and lessons there. But
I say
I don't know if
again,
there's a
you
way
know-
to streamline the Google Classroom it was pretty technical for a second grader, I thought.
That's a good example of why I make the statement, there's no substitute for the student being in the classroom.
Yeah.
We can do the best we can do, but that's all we can do, is the best we can do.
I heard similar to what he had, and this was back in the spring, a lot of parents would rather have gotten, and this may be a bad way to approach it, but a week's worth of work so they could have sat down with their kid, be it a Saturday afternoon or something else, and focus and let's get it all done, because it was sporadic and a little bit of busy work and all that, instead of the daily grind of print this and then take pictures of it to email it back to the teacher and everything that went with it. I think a lot of them are looking for that expectation of, this is what we need to get done this week, is
Yeah.
this amount of work.
And
So they can be more flexible with their at-home teaching.
keep in mind, we knew we were going to go to teaching kids at home the day before we did it.
Exactly.
We've had all summer to prepare this time.
And it got way better from March 15th to April 15th.
Yeah. And we won't be as good August 24th as we will be September 24th. You know, we will still keep getting better. I don't have any doubt about that. Any of y'all want to address all those issues a little bit? Bob?
I'm sorry, I wasn't gonna talk to you, I'm sorry. I would say, like, just exactly what Mr. Willie said, the amount of preparation that teachers have done this summer to get, yes, did we have kids that didn't know how to use classroom last semester? Yes, we did. But this semester, that's day one stuff. I mean, kids are getting Chromebooks from the beginning. Google Classroom's gonna be set up district-wide, very, very similar. The tech people are pushing that out.
And that's the
We've
intent,
done
if we
a
get
lot of
shut down
preparation.
3 weeks in, we
Yeah.
showed them how to use it the first week. I got you. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that too, but with Google Classroom, we met as a tech team from each building and said, hey, how can we streamline this? How can we make what a parent who's got a kindergartner and a parent who's got a sixth grader see, so it's similar and can find things easier and know where to look. So we're working on that as a district to make that streamlined, so parents that have kids in different buildings will be able to navigate that much simpler. A lot of things like that have been done.
I just echo what Kim said. I don't know how to express the amount of time, first of all of us, but certainly all of our teachers also have put in this summer. That was not, you know, in our teachers' cases, in hours and hours and hours of non-contracted, non-paid time, because that's just what they are. We told them that, you know, within reason, we will pay you for this, because it's got to get done. And we had some teachers, I'm thinking of one particular teacher, that I think she reported that she had worked 30-something days, full days, this summer on school work. And they've worked their tails off, because that's what teachers do, to be as prepared as they can be.
Well, and hearing each school's plan, I mean, I think the high school and middle school, and it's what you and I have talked about when we were here last month, you know, you had even said if, in everything, it changes, but you said, you know, if we have 100 students sign up for online learning, that's probably going to be 3 or 4 online teachers. And it seems like that's what, you know, the middle school and high school, we were able to make that work. And then in the 2 younger schools, we are asking teachers right now, in most classes that I've heard of, you've got in-person, virtual, and blended, all in the same class. And starting from a teacher standpoint, there is no way that is not asking them to do so much additional work. I mean, you have primary school teachers that didn't have recess duty or lunch duty last year, and now they have both of those with virtual students. And then you're going to have some kids go home. I mean, what I'm hearing, they're going to have to do the Lincoln Learning, so, you know, some of that, which is a good tool, because let's use that time to go and teach the kids online. I think it does the kids that are sitting in that classroom
We've got their schedules set up, and I can't give you the specifics. I don't know the times.
Well, let
but-
me kind of keep going on that.
Okay.
In person, I mean, my kids, if they're in person, there's no way a teacher can't say, I've got to go do some of this because I got 6 virtual kids that are depending on me. And then you have 2 kids go home at lunch, and she's like, okay, I got to get, little Sally's fixing to start social studies. I got to get social studies on. I don't know how we got away from figuring out the amount of virtual teachers we could have. And, I'm taking all that into consideration that what I heard is y'all think this will be best if schools close. And it'll be best if little Johnny is on virtual and comes into a classroom. And so it seems like we're planning on some ifs when you've got teachers who are fixing to their workload. I don't see how, we're going to give them 20 to 30 minutes in the morning and 20, 30 minutes in the afternoon. I mean, I talked to a teacher one time and I'm on the phone 20 or 30 minutes. I feel like we might have missed something there with how we could have done that. And I
Well-
don't know where it left from July 8th, our last meeting, to here today and finding out my kid has blended, in-person, and virtual all in their same class.
Well, you're saying using blended and virtual. Of course, we're calling it remote learning, not virtual.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, you are right.
But there's really no difference in those two, in blended and remote learning, in terms of the only difference is the student may be coming to school some of the time. But when they're not coming to school, the instruction of those two is identical. It's the same thing, same situation. No difference in them at all. If I'm blended and I'm home for math, and I'm remote learning and I'm home for math, it's the same math. There's no difference in those.
Do you think how we have it set up, it is requiring additional work on teachers that we didn't have to if we would have set it up separately?
No, I don't think it's, answer your question exactly how you ask it, no. Is it additional work? Yes. We're all going to be doing additional work. We've all been doing additional work. I don't think that what we're doing is any more work for teachers than if we were doing it some other way. And I feel very strongly, and all these people will concur, if we've talked about it till we're all blue in the face, we are completely convinced that this is what's best for kids, that this is the best combination. Is it perfect? Is it a magic bullet? No. Is it as good as what we did this time last year? No, it's
Then
not.
tell
but
me-
that is, we can't fix that.
I understand the intent of if we get shut down, my 3rd grader will have the same teacher on the computer that she had the first day of school. But at the same time, I also question if there's 250 3rd graders and 20% are going to be remote. If there's 50 kids, we don't just take 2 teachers that maybe volunteer for it or are best fit for it and say, you've got 25, you've got 25. And I've not had a older teacher or a less technology savvy teacher come to me and say they're concerned, but I would imagine there's some teachers better at technology than others. Maybe take some of that, because I do think if you're teaching 25 kids and every teacher's got 5 that are remote, that does seem, we're planning for something that if it happens, it'll make a lot of sense, but if it doesn't happen.
Well, I say again, one of 2 things is going to happen. Either we're going home or we're not going home. I mean, that's just a binary choice.
But we're starting, as of today, we're starting. It happened,
Yeah.
they could change tomorrow as well.
And if
Like with every school year, you have to monitor and adjust as the day goes by, as the week goes by. And there can't be a perfect plan, we all know that. But I think our teachers, and I've worked with many of them for a long time, they all know that there's going to be some monitoring and adjusting to do as we progress through this first few weeks of school. And some of them may have to do that eventually, but I think we got to give them a chance to start the way they have got it planned and then adjust as needed.
I think some are just finding out this. I don't think this has been I think,
I've still not got my letter.
We've had pretty clear conversations through email and also other announcements that likely teachers are going to have multiple types of learning styles in their classroom.
We left last year this summer, we will fully develop our curriculum, and we will all come back prepared to teach through Google Classroom. And we were planning from the beginning to have a digital platform available.
But did we say we're gonna expect y'all to teach some of these kids all day in person, and we're gonna expect y'all to figure out a way to teach 5 of these kids that are at home, and then 2 or 3 are gonna come and go throughout the day, and we're gonna expect you to teach them too?
If it was 10 kids total, I can see that, but at the same time, if there's 2 full classrooms worth, I can see the benefit of just putting them, just looking at the numbers of, you've got these 25, you got these 25.
I have a friend in virtual, and she wanted her kid in a virtual classroom because how a teacher teaches a kid that is in person, you know, one of the teachers I talked to, she said, you know, I've got to stand up at the board now. I got a camera on me, and then, you know, normally I'd be right down there with a kid here, go to this table, but I got 3 kids that are, you know, so I'm changing everything I do for those 3 kids that I'm being videoed for. And so,
Is there precedent for other districts in the region, how they're handling this?
I've called Van Buren, Greenwood, and 2 Northwest Arkansas schools, and all 4 are not doing it the way we're doing it.
Well, that's not quite correct.
Well,
You named Greenwood. Greenwood is doing, on the secondary level, almost exactly what we're doing. And on the elementary, that's what the superintendent told me. That's what the superintendent told me, him to me. And on the elementary level, they're doing some of what we're doing in some cases, and in other cases, there are teachers that are teaching only virtually. They're doing a combination of both.
I mean, elementary level, as I said, I think our middle school and high school, no plan is perfect, but I think the sheet I got showed I have the names of the teachers that are doing virtual at Greenwood, the ones that are doing in person. I have the number of students that are virtual, so I mean, unless it's changed in 2 days. Van Buren?
Van Buren has a unique situation that they were, you know, sometimes you do things that you don't know that are going to turn out to be as good as they do. Van Buren a couple of years ago started an online virtual academy that for K-12, it's technically a charter school. They can enroll students from anywhere, well, anywhere in Arkansas. So all of their students that want to stay home, they're just enrolling them into their virtual academy, which already exists and already has its own teachers.
I have an employee whose fiance is a teacher in Northwest Arkansas, and actually, due to an underlying health issue, applied to be a virtual teacher for that specific grade.
I think we missed an opportunity. I think to pull some of those that would want it.
Well, you know, all I can tell you is, this is the way we're prepared to start. And I don't know how many times I would need to say it, I think our track record is quite good that when we need to adjust and make changes, we don't hesitate to do so.
Right.
We never have. We won't in this case. If it doesn't work, if we start seeing that this is not the best thing for kids, you've never known us to. In fact, you've called me down a few times on wanting to go off and do something different.
And I do think having every teacher comfortable with teaching virtual will result in a better product if the whole district goes virtual.
If we shut down in 2 weeks, this will have been the right call. I have no doubt to get get them doing that. If it never shuts down, it's a lot of.
And all I can tell you, Carrie, and it's what I just said, I'm just going to repeat myself. If we never shut down and we see at 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks that we need to regroup and do it differently, we won't hesitate to do that. And you know me well enough to know that we won't.
I just think making sure we're talking to them. I think teachers just inherently, what I've found being on the board is they just don't gripe a lot. They will do as they are told. It's, they're not vocal about it. And so just
all we can do is tell them, and we tell them, you've seen me say it, you've heard me say it, and the principals say the same thing. And the last thing I say to every new teacher we hire, right after I say we're offering you a job and they say yes, the last thing I say to them is, you're going to have questions, you're going to have problems, you're going to need things, And that's what we're here for. And the thing I know for sure, we can't help you if you don't tell us about it, because we can't read your mind. And we beat that into them all the time.
What about,
I don't disagree with your point that I wish they would come to us more than they do. I agree with that.
Well,
I don't know,
maybe-
you know, all we can do is just tell them over and over and over, please let us know what you're thinking.
Well, so,
what about where are we technology-wise? I know someone sent me, I don't do much social media, but someone sent me a screen capture of a teacher asking somebody to give them a webcam. Where are we on?
We've got everything we need. We own about 4,000 Chromebooks. We're fine there. And that's a good point. I'm glad you asked that question. Last spring, we had about 300 students that didn't have internet access at home. The combination of something the state is doing and then we're supplementing it ourselves, everybody that needs a hotspot will have a hotspot at no cost to them. We don't have them yet. Hopefully they're going to show up any day. But you know, we've got some coming both for AT&T and Verizon, because as you all may know, there's some places in the district that one works and the other doesn't. So we're going to be researching that with the individuals. So when we give them a Chromebook, if we're going to ask that question, you know, find that out. Do you need a hotspot? And we're going to have it for them. So we are planning on every household having internet access.
Okay, and what about teachers as far as the tools they'll need to?
Diane, what's her name? Pam gave me a note this afternoon, just as a case in that, we need 30 more document cameras. You know, I didn't get that done this afternoon, but we'll get that ordered for, you know, we don't intend for a teacher to be without anything they need, whatever it is. Some of our teachers have asked for Chromebooks of their own because they don't have one or whatever. Sure, we got them. We'll be sure teachers have everything they need, whatever it is. I think I talked last meeting about wireless microphones. For our experience, we've got a bunch of those. They came in. Our experimenting with Chromebooks, and we've had a couple of meetings in this room with some people not able to attend, and we did that on Google Meets with a Chromebook sitting over there where Pat's sitting, and they could see and hear the whole room just fine. So I'm not as convinced that the wireless mics are needed in most cases, but we have them if they are. And if we need more, we'll get more.
Back last spring, I think we were also working on improving the Wi-Fi in the parking lots when there was some hardware ordered. Did that get done?
Yeah,
Where are we on that?
It's installed. We've installed it and it's still there.
Okay.
You know, I don't anticipate that really being a great need since everybody's going to have a hotspot that needs it, but it's still there.
I live in a dead spot. The hotspot, we tried that, does no good at my house. So I think you're going to have some places where even that's not workable.
Neither company? Which?
I had both phones, and I live in a freaking.
Well, you're just going to have to move.
Yeah, I know it.
You know, I know we'll have.
So you'll have some of that.
Yeah.
You know.
And you know, I don't know what it might be, but if there's a solution and that we can do, we'll do it.
The only other question I've had from a teacher is mainly for the older kids where they're teaching a lot of different subjects during the day is say they've got a physics student, one or two that are virtual remote, and they decide they don't want to, you know, 16 wants to, they want to do their homework late at night, and it's all of a sudden, I don't know how to do physics, and it's 8:30 at night. Well, I've got the teacher's number, I'll text her or I'll email her, whatever. Is there any kind of expectation set that, you know?
That happens right now. That happens in normal conditions, that a student will email or text a teacher at all hours. Now, you know, you can't expect a teacher to be awake at 3 a.m. to answer it necessarily, but that happens, and that will happen, sure. And it'll happen more than it happens normally, but it happens all the time.
Well, but if it's 8:30 at night and the teacher doesn't respond until the next morning during her break period, and then the parent,
Sure.
next thing you know, the parent's calling the school saying, you know, my kid can't get a hold of the teacher.
One of the things we talked about, JD, you want to talk about what you and I talked about the Sunday night thing?
Sure. Well, and we have, to answer that part, we have told our teachers that if that happens,
we can't stop that from happening, texting or whatever, emailing. But we're not requiring you to respond to that immediately. We told every parent in our meetings for our remote students that our teachers are available from 8 to 4, and your remote teacher is gonna be available at this block of time. That's when they'll
Okay.
respond to you.
That's perfect,
when they'll
yeah.
answer your question.
Very good.
We can't stop them from doing that.
Sure.
And some teachers, like he said, they take it upon themselves now,
Right.
and that's just who they are, and they don't care, but that is not an expectation of me.
Good.
The Sunday night thing that a few of the schools have thrown around and are close to landing on is the idea that every remote student's assignment is due on Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. Regardless if that's 5 assignments or 2 assignments or whatever the case may be.
For that week, for that preceding week.
Every remote student's assignment is due every week on Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. And the thought behind that is to make life easier for parents. There's consistency. They know every week when the assignments are due. You know, the example that we threw around talking to each other about it, and when I got feedback from teachers about it was, you know, a lot of our teachers are going to grad school, and they said, I'm a grad student, and my graduate professors don't even expect me to keep up with due dates throughout the week. They make everything due at 11:59 on Sunday night. So it makes sense that we wouldn't expect a 6th grader to keep up with 8 different due dates throughout the week. And that makes a lot of sense, and so we've talked a lot about that. Haven't landed specifically as we are 100% doing that, but we really like the idea of it for consistency. And we talk about getting parents involved and making it easy for parents to be involved, and I think that's a step we can take to make it easier on parents to be involved.
That's how it was. I had online classes 18 years ago, and that's exactly when it was due, was 11:59.
And, you know,
Sunday night.
the risk in that is kids putting off till Sunday at 8 o'clock to start on
You'd
it.
be amazed what you can get done on Sunday nights. I will
They
tell
do
you
that anyway when you're in school.
Two other things I do along this line I do want to mention. We don't know much yet about athletics. We keep hearing that there's going to be an announcement, there's going to be an announcement, there's going to be an announcement, and it doesn't happen. So far as we know, right now today, athletics is going to proceed on the normal schedule. Some of the benefit games and scrimmage games are getting ready to start, and as you may know, not just for schools, but for any kind of large group gathering of more than 100 people, you have to write a plan on how you're going to do that, how you're going to keep everybody safe, and the health department has to approve that plan. There's been a lot of plans submitted by schools that have not come back. They've not come back at all. They're just sitting there. Heard late this afternoon that the health department kind of finally figured out they got to get that going. So our plan for football and volleyball is in, and we're waiting on to hear from the health department. Here's something it's important that I talk about. You know, 3 weeks from tomorrow night, is that right, Van Buren? 3 weeks from tomorrow night, Doug, is the Van Buren game here. As you know, you've all been to it, normally there'd be 6,000 or 7,000 people there. Under the social distancing rules, we can only let 2,000 people in. And that's not going to be pretty. There's no matter what we do and how much we put the word out, there's going to be people that are going to be really unhappy that they can't come to that game. Our plan is to only sell tickets in advance. We can seat about 500 within the social distancing rules that the state will approve on the visitor side and 1,500 on the home side. I talked with the Van Buren superintendent about this just this afternoon. Of course, they got to do the same thing on their home games. We're going to give Van Buren 500 tickets. We're going to require everybody to buy tickets in advance, for sure, for the Van Buren game. And we're going to give them 500 tickets, and what they do with them is up to them. I would assume that they will first make them available to the families of their players, and then go from there. We're going to do something similar to that with our players. We'll make tickets available. We don't have the specifics worked out yet, or how many, or how much, or who all. We don't know what we're going to do about passes. We have quite a number of people. All of our staff typically have passes to athletic events. One of the things we don't know how to handle is if we let passes be good for the Van Buren game, how many? Who's going to come? Who's not going to come? How many of the 1,500 is that? So it's going to get interesting to get this figured out and get it working, particularly for the Van Buren game, because it's always such an overflow crowd. So just know, and as soon as we get this all, and we got to get this all figured out in the next few days. The Van Buren superintendent and I committed today that we've got to know for sure how we're going to do everything by a week from today.
So I hate to get too far into the weeds here, but this is a plan that Alma School District would have to submit and be approved.
That's right.
because
The governor said today, and he didn't explain what he meant, but all of a sudden apparently they've realized they've got about 300 plans to approve. And it's really more than that, because we submitted two, one for the stadium and one for the arena. It's really more than 300. And I think they've all of a sudden realized, oh, we can't do that. So he said today that they're working on some general rules that will apply to everybody, so that they'll be less unique and specific to a particular school that has to be done. But that's all I know about that. Is he said that in his briefing this afternoon. But yeah, Doug wrote up, well, of course, we had to do the same thing for graduation. We had to write a plan to have graduation in the stadium, which we did. And they approved it. And our plan for football is not all that different from that plan, because it's the same place, same venue. There were some things different. Of course, we have to write part of the plan has to be how we're going to handle concessions. What are we going to sell? How are we going to keep people safe there? How are we going to sanitize restrooms? It just goes and goes and goes. Where are hand sanitizer stations going to be in the venue? It's pretty detailed. But the bottom line is, we're not going to be able to accommodate but about a third of the normal crowd.
Who came up with the 2,000?
I'm sorry?
How did y'all come up with the 2,000?
Again, it's very strict rules on a large venue like a stadium or an arena or an auditorium or anything like that. You can only let people sit in every other row, and you have to leave 2 seats empty between family units. Well, a family unit could be 1 person or 6 people or 3 people. So we just kind of have to guess at that. We used 4 in our calculations. So by the time you take every other row and leave 2 seats, and then 4 people, and then 2 seats, and then 4 people. That's why we did our calculation. That's where the number comes from.
So what about enforcement, and how do you avoid getting in a situation like the Peacemaker Music Festival?
Yeah.
You let in the appropriate number of people, but then people don't.
That's a question. Obviously, everybody's supposed to wear a mask. Are we going to go around in the stands and say, hey, put your mask back on? And are we going to say, no, that row was marked off, you're not supposed to be sitting there? Those are all questions.
Well, I had a meeting with Chief Pointer, and we were discussing that. We got another meeting this coming week, and we're discussing how to proceed with that a little bit, because that is the question. Do we have the right to go tell them, or do the police have the right to go tell them? We're discussing that in a lot of ways right now.
What do we do? This is kind of digressing. If a student won't put a mask on,
We're going to treat that. We're going to ask them to go home and become a remote student. Which brings up another point. That's easy. If they're just being belligerent, just saying I'm not doing it, we'll kind of treat it as a discipline issue. Contact the parents, see if we can't get it resolved, and if we can't, we're just going to suggest probably the best thing for you is to learn remotely. What we will also have, and this is in the state regs, if a student, say, has bad asthma and really can't wear a mask, we just have to take their word for that. We can't require medical documentation. But, our kids and our parents, we have good relationships with them. I don't anticipate that becoming confrontational. We'll work with them. But this will happen. We're going to have some kids. We can probably name them right now. Kids that have asthma, can't wear a mask. We know they're there. We'll have some other parents that say, "Well, my kid's in this class, and so-and-so's not wearing a mask, and I don't want my kid in a class with somebody that's not wearing a mask." And we're going to have all that to work through. And we'll just have to, talk with people, and hopefully reasonable people can come to reasonable decisions. One more thing I want to mention on this Just today, we put up a new web page on our website. You go to almasd.net, and it's just right there in your face, but it is a separate, over here to the web page, that just links you to it, of a number of different documents, everything about this. A lot of stuff we've already sent out. It's not done yet. There's still more things to go on it. We're producing a couple of videos that probably will be ready late tomorrow that are go on it, explaining some things and showing some things. Kind of a one-stop shop, a place that parents can go, that everything they might want to know is going to be there. We will continue to add new stuff to that as we come up with things that ought to be added. Tomorrow we will we will start publicizing it. As I said, we just got it up a few hours ago with the first things on it. But we'll send an email to parents tomorrow saying, if you got a question, here's where you can go get your answer. We'll put that on social media, all that sort of thing, so that parents, but you can go to it right now. You go to almasd.net, and it's right there. It tells you, it gives you the link to click right there to take you to it. I think that'll be helpful. That'll give people a place to go for everything they need to know.
Could you produce a video of some sort, like a parent's guide to Google Classroom, maybe? I know.
Good thought. Yes.
You know,
we will do
some of us
that.
have seen it, and some of us haven't, and some parents are more
Yep.
tech savvy than others.
That's a good idea. Thank you. We ready to move on?
Any other questions on that issue?
I want to take a minute. I mailed you the drawings last week, and I want to discuss them a little bit and point out a couple of things. If you need somebody to help you hold that. Oh, okay. Get out. Get out there where they can all see it pretty well. I'm going to use a laser pointer to try to point out some things to you that I want to be sure that you're aware of. I think I am. Yeah, okay. So the goal, some of you probably looked at this when you got it in the mail more than others did. The goal is the existing field house that we built in 1995. This part right in here, sorry, I'm shaking. I don't know if it's steady. This part in right in here was what's been referred to the last 3 or 4 years as the big room. It's what we had for an indoor workout facility. It wasn't very big, but that's what we had. We're going to turn the biggest part of that into our weight room. And then down here at the bottom of it is coaches' offices. Our coaches' offices right now are on the second floor of the press box, because that's the only space we had. That doesn't work the best. The other thing that's happened in the 25 years since we built this building, we've grown a lot. Our dressing rooms aren't big enough. So right here is where the weight room is now, in that area. We're going to redo the dressing room areas for senior high football and junior high football and increase the size of our dressing rooms here. Because of what we're building down here, it's no problem giving up this space as a workout space, because we're more than replacing it down here. You can't see this real well in detail in the green, but I hope you looked at this part right here, which is the agriculture space. This is mostly, we've done 3 or 4 tours of facilities. We've looked at, 6 or 7 different schools, agri facilities. This is mostly patterned after the very new one that Farmington built. Theirs is only about 3 years old. We really liked it. Lakin went with us on that trip. And this is patterned very much like it. It's got office space up here in the front, 2 big classrooms, a really big shop. And then in the future, we're not talking about doing this right now, but this is showing a future greenhouse down here at the bottom, out here at the back. Now, let me say, I should have said this to begin with. We're not done. Now, we put a good deal of time into this, but we're not done. We're not ready to tell the architect, go. He's been meeting with us, and we've been talking about different ideas. Lakin's met with us 3 or 4 times about the agri space, and we're still working to get it exactly right before we go forward. And then, of course, this is the activity center. There was not a lot to work on that. It's just a big open space, but we're pretty much settled on what that needs to be.
Is that a 60-yard football field? That's what it looks like.
Yes, yeah, the space is 200 by 200, about. I'm not sure it's exactly that, but it's about 200 by 200. Let's go to,
You mean
I want
football
you to look
practice
at
fields?
another drawing, which is the
You're
more
put- What kind of
important.
floors it got?
Yeah, what's on the floor?
It's gonna be turf.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the same product as in this football stadium because it's indoor, but it's a similar product.
Football actually probably uses less than anybody else. They're outside all the time anyway. They're gonna be in the weight room and on the field. Soccer will be in there, baseball will be in there, ROTC will be in there. Football probably, unless they go in there for heat or lighting in the summer, they're probably not gonna be there as much as many of our programs.
Y'all keep telling me that. We'll see.
Honestly.
You know, you look at the schools that have them, that's true. You know, our peer
It blew my
institutions.
mind at Southside when we did it. It really is used a lot, spring sport more than anything.
I know you can't see this real well, and I'm sorry. This is a different drawing of the barn than the one I mailed you, because, to be honest with you, the one I mailed you, Travis and the architect and I did, and we hadn't been able to get Lakin with us, and then when Lakin got with us, it changed a lot.
A lot.
Lakin, why don't you come up here and kind of just talk them through what this is? I know they can't see it real well, but just help them understand what all we're doing here in the barn, and I'll try to
So you want
point
to just describe what's in it, like explain what?
what the
pieces
spaces are, why we need them,
Okay.
what the point is.
So, we have our wet lab here, which will pretty much just be a classroom with the excessive lab space on the side. So we'll have sinks for dissections, those types of things. The ability to pull live animals in if we need that. And then you have your storage and office just right off that. Bathrooms. We have in this, let's see, 6 cattle pens. Those are 20 by 20. So the reason that we decided to go with that, or that we decided when we kind of put this together, the space on that is because there's room for growth with that. You can put 2, if you wanted, you could put 2 cattle in that pen space instead of making it smaller and eliminating that option. You have your indoor feed room, and then on this other side.
Before you go, talk about the indoor-outdoor aspect. of
Okay,
that.
yes. So all the cattle pens will have the ability, a roll-up door or some sort of door to be able to go open it to an outdoor pens that are partially covered and the rest are just runs. So that in the daytime we can keep them in, and then at night, these are show cattle. We have to treat them differently than what we normally probably would otherwise. So at night we can let them out, they can be outside, and then pull them in during the heat of the day or whatever it may be. Then you have your indoor feed room, and on this other side, so we have our cattle on that side, and then we have all our small livestock on across from that. So we have sheep and goats, and then we put the tack and equipment room in the center there. And that was solely for the sake of being able to separate sheep and goats from pigs. Goats don't like pigs very well, so that's why we functioned it that way instead of putting all the pens together. And then on the other side, you have your pig pens and your wash rack. And really, that's the gist of it all. Outside of the wet lab, we'll have a facility, a covered area that extends farther out where we'll be able to put a cattle chute and do different labs with cattle and animals outside there under that awning. So, do you have any questions?
Should we talk about the space down the middle?
Okay,
The open space in the middle?
Yes, the open space in the middle. We want the ability to be able to pull a vehicle through there, but then in addition to that, we have cattle grooming chutes and sheep stands or goat stands, and all the, we need space for students to be able to set up, clip their animals, whatever they need to do, blow dry their animals. And so we need, you're gonna have cattle all down this, potentially. And so with that, we need enough space to be able to safely maneuver around those cattle chutes that those cattle are standing in, or those sheep and goats, on those stands all throughout and down the barn. That's why there's such a big space down the middle.
One of the other things we thought about this end is as the program goes, if we need more cattle pens and more sheep and goat and pig pens, this end it's easily to expand the building out to the left as far as we need to, as many times as we need to in the future. Questions?
Proposed location?
think being in the visitors football parking lot, the west side of the football stadium, where the road comes around and comes back towards the school. We're talking about extending that road straight west, just south of the grass football fields and just north of the baseball complex. And it would be, that road would go straight on across there to the west side of that and be immediately west, at the end of that road, immediately west of the grass football fields and the baseball complex. Be a straight shot from the other building, straight down that road to.
Right west of the current outdoor batting cage.
Yeah,
Somewhere in
yeah.
there.
Could I arm twist you to walk your drawing over onto the greens, if you don't care, since they made the trouble to come here?
If they want to do it.
How many acres will that and the fencing around it? What are we?
A couple, and we got 30 unused acres out there.
Right.
We're not doing anything with it.
Be nice if we had somebody donate some more land that's down there.
Wouldn't it? I'd like to buy some of your unused land.
You're in the business of buying, not donating, are you? Same.
They're not making any more of it except in Hawaii, right?
That's good. I'm gonna use that one.
Can you email it? Why you can't? Why? No, I've only one I've seen is the one y'all mailed me.
I'll take a picture.
That'll work.
You should be able to PDF that, and send it out to us. Craig could.
Any more questions about all that?
Could you get a PDF of that and have it emailed to us?
Sure can.
So
So
on Google Earth, so that
I know where the heck you're talking about.
Or you've been homeschooled, they tested out or something, I don't know.
right.
But 8 years old, you could be in third grade maybe.
You may be accelerated.
Pretty heavy.
Here's that road.
That's good.
That road
Yeah.
right out there and be right there. That road would be the access to it.
We've had them before.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
makes you wonder about some of these people. So,
Have y'all walked that? I mean, what's your, I might have a ninth grader starting this year, so I don't know what your time is between classes, and so going from.
Yeah, it'll be it's about a 5-minute walk.
From whatever
Yeah.
far into the rest of the campus.
If you're, not lollygagging, it's less than 5 minutes.
Is there any advantage to having that and the other facility together in the same building?
Well, yes, there would be. If we had, you always have to make compromises. The perfect thing would be for the barn to be immediately south of the high school, but we don't own enough land to do that.
It's for sale.
That's where I was getting ready to go. The big house that you all know where I'm talking about has a new owner, and I have talked with him. He seems like they're moving here from the other side of the state. He seems very nice and wants to be a supporter of Alma School District. Not asking the question about the land, but I'm going to. If we could buy some land there, that'd be ideal, so that it's not all the way across. Putting both facilities off over there would have students always making that walk, whereas doing what we're proposing here, if we can't do it closer, only some days would they make that walk. What would you guess, Lakin, on typically, with what we're talking about, for a given student, how often are they going to go to the barn?
And for my animal science classes, I mean, we'll be there probably at 3 times a week, maybe more, but it won't be every day. It'll be a lot more though. Intro classes and some of those others, that will of course lessen because you're doing a lot of different stuff. So that may be for a few weeks out of, this month or that month, but that won't be a constant. It'll just be for a unit here or a unit there.
So do you see an advantage to like as mentioned, the other 2 classrooms and lab being attached to this barn?
We probably wouldn't attach it. We would put it just right to the south, if we could buy some land. I don't know that we would want, it is a barn. It's,
Right.
it's going to have barn animals in it. So I don't know that you would want it actually attached to the school.
Correct. But how far are we from?
Oh,
The 2 classrooms proposed in the other building, how far is that?
To the barn, that's what we were saying a minute ago, but probably about a 5-minute walk.
Okay, I misunderstood that it's 5 minutes from another part of campus.
I like the idea of considering purchasing.
I'm gonna try to. I mean, you know, he may say, no, that's why I bought this place, I'm not selling anything. But learned a long time ago, when the worst thing can happen is to be told no, ask the question.
So the being attached raises the issue. So I looked at the green and gold drawing you've got. So you've got the, what looks like the ag shop. So if you're having welding and things like that in there, I mean, that's right adjacent to what you've got labeled as film, which I'm assuming is for athletics and film room. And I mean, odors and smells. I mean, I see possible issues.
We talked about that, the
attached.
architect brought that point, that very point up, and we're gonna deal with that with structure. So that,
Go over timeline.
of course, the first thing that, you know, we can't do anything till we can pay for it. And that's, of course, the next thing on the agenda is to deal with that. We are going to proceed as if that's all going to work out like we want it to, and within the next few days, get our ideas finalized, and I've already talked with our architect about having the construction drawings ready for us to put it out for bid right after the election, within the next few days after the election, so that we can realistically probably move dirt right after Christmas, because the election, of course, is mid-January. You got to have bidding time. Excuse me, the election is early November. You got to have time to put it out for bid, which takes about 3 weeks to meet the legalities of bidding construction.
So, I guess, so I'm confused, because we're in mid-August, and election is early November. How far are we away from construction drawings? If these are just preliminary, I assume it's going to take.
He says he can crank these out in about 6 weeks.
Is there a reason to rush it?
The sooner we build it, the sooner we can use it.
Certainly, but
When we're not, you rushing it from a standpoint of cutting corners or not getting it right?
Not getting it right, or what if the land is available for sale, but it can't close
Well,
for?
absolutely. No, you're right. Yeah. Getting it right is more important than getting it fast.
I would agree.
Absolutely.
I
No
would
question.
agree.
No question about that. You know, this will all, we're working on, you know, we've been working on all this. It's not something that we're just getting ready to start on. The people that have bought the house, to my knowledge, have not moved yet, but they're here on the weekends. I've talked to him on the phone a couple of times. I have not actually met him. Have you, Brian?
No, just on the phone.
He reached out to us and wanted to just let us know that he was going to be our neighbor, and he wanted to be a good neighbor and wanted to support us. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how that can go. But, you know, I would like to shoot toward trying to be in the facility not at the beginning of next school year, but in the fall. I don't think there's any way we can be in it a year from today. But I would like to be in it by January of '22. But we'll get in it whenever we get in it. You know, we'll start using it whenever it's finished, whenever that is. There's no deadline, there's no magic date. It's just that the sooner we get it built, the sooner we can use it. And, you know, quite honestly, with the great job that Lakin's doing and the number of students in the program, we need to get it built because it's important to those kids.
Will the ballot be 2 questions? I think
No,
we had talked.
it's all in
So, I
one.
mean, to lower the mill and do this is
Yeah.
all one question?
We're going to look at that in just a second.
Okay.
So, I'm worried with preliminary plans and kind of a tentative location. I mean, how are we on budget? I mean, where are our numbers for what we're about to?
I think
vote on
what we
budget
talked
number?
about in March or February, whenever it was, went through that PowerPoint, we're still good. I've gone over all that again with the architect a month ago, maybe less than that, I don't remember.
I guess I'd have the same concern because, like I said, this drawing is significantly more elaborate than the other.
It is, but it's still a barn. You know, it's not high dollar finishes inside, it's just space. We think we're fine.
Well, I mean, I think the bigger issue would be fill, right? So that where your proposed location does in fact flood, and so, I mean.
Yeah, again, this is a conversation I had with Craig Boone, our architect. We're talking about the not using steel, building the walls, the load-bearing walls out of block, so that if the building does flood, there's no damage to it. It gets wet inside, of course, but the building itself would not be damaged if it did flood. Now, that's not to say we're not going to elevate it.
Well, that's not my concern, right? I mean, steel, it wouldn't even bother it that much. My issue is if you've got livestock in there that you have to feed multiple times a day, and there's a foot of water out there. And,
Oh, no.
And the parking lot's got water
Sure.
standing in it. You gotta get out there still, right?
How far off elevation is it from what we had? Was it
Well, let
last
me
year or
answer it
2
this
years
way.
ago, or-
Let me answer it this way. Of course, when it floods, it comes from the creek to the west. In my 48 years, that's happened twice. Now, that's happened twice.
No, Mr. Woolley, I've owned that farm 10 years, and hell, it's flooded 3 times.
Well-
In due respect, the flood, where this will flood, does not actually come from the creek. It comes from that excess overflow in that first bridge, right?
Yeah, you're right.
The creek flood really doesn't get you in the baseball fields.
And honestly, to correct myself, the 2 times I'm talking about, it actually flooded the football stadium. It got that
Yeah,
far.
so that's.
What we may need to do is us, the school district and you get together and reroute that drainage that comes under the road and get it so it gets on, dig it out, maybe not reroute it, but dig that out, get it where it can get off the property faster.
Would that help the baseball and softball fields out there, or?
Well, when the baseball field floods, that's where that water comes from.
So it's a function of a heavy rain south of Rudy. The creek actually, the last time it flooded this past year, the creek was not flooded. I was almost trapped down there. It's the overflow, and it's all about where the rain falls, because the creek wasn't high, because they were putting in the new trestles. And we drove down there, and by the time we came out, it was over the bumper of the truck just past the White's house, and it flooded this parking lot and the baseball field on that one. And that was this past summer.
It's been a while, as in 3 or 4 years, but I did one time have a conversation with the city about us trying to work on that drainage, that whole drainage system there.
So the big problem is not even in the city. So that first ditch that you're talking about is really a minor blip. It's the next one down.
Okay, down on your property?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where the city gate, AOG city gate is, that particular piece.
And that's county?
Yeah, it's outside the city limits, yeah.
But even if you fix that, does the creek, the possibility for the creek to get up is still there?
It is, and there's, it's water, so there's a bunch of issues, right? So it depends on what the river's doing, it depends on where the creek is at, and then it depends on where the rainfall is, whether it's at Rudy or above, because that'll get the creek up. But if it's south of Rudy, it'll get this excess, kind of this bypass or overflow up, and sometimes it's all of the above, right? River's up, creek's
Sure.
up, and that is a big rain.
So is the west end of the house, it's in the floodplain as well, correct? The west end of that property?
Part of it probably is, but it actually is some of the last flood. I mean, it's kind of rising as it comes up there.
Which is another reason why moving the barn to that area would be advantageous.
And Phil has been brought in, so where they practice baseball and football right now, that there's been a bunch of fill brought in there. So I mean, you've already raised it some. It drops off still on the school's property, and
Yeah.
that floods more.
That's all doable. We haven't had a civil engineer out there,
We'll have
but
to go drive out there.
Craig, our architect, has looked at it and considered it.
I had a contractor tell me it's about, rough size on a barn, I don't know the dimensions on this because it's got scale but not marks, it's about $30,000 a vertical foot, so.
And we might be able to get the fill pretty cheaply from some friends. Let's just maybe say that.
But behind the existing arena and behind the house, obviously we don't know if the land's for sale or not, but that's at a point where it's already at a higher elevation and it could be brought up to above flood.
Easily, yeah.
I think I don't know why we're not just.
We are.
Let's find a way to make that happen,
Yeah.
otherwise.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna end up, it's gonna be late August full of show animals before the fair and somebody's gotta go down and rescue them because the creek's rising.
Well,
And
probably
floods
not,
them.
around here, probably not in August, but I get your point.
Well.
No, we're gonna work at that.
He's probably watching this meeting right now thinking, my property just went up.
It might cost you buying land than it did to fill with the other place. You never know.
Well, but can we fill the other place up above flood elevation?
Sure we can, sure.
So I think you can pretty fairly economically probably get the barn up, right? But then the parking lot, unless you're gonna repave the parking lot gets deep enough, I wouldn't drive a car out there.
Mhm.
And then, I mean, and it doesn't stay up a long time, I don't mean
But the
to
building,
mislead
get the
anybody.
building up and everything inside the building.
Yeah.
Didn't we have a bunch of arena dirt put back there? Isn't
That's,
right behind?
that's the field that Sean was talking about that's immediately straight south of the football stadium. That's arena fill.
Yeah, so I mean, you've raised it, I mean, you're not starting at where it would have been.
The practice field. Okay. So tonight.
Somebody asked a few minutes ago about timeline and talked about this project. I would like, and again, this is all very flexible and very loose, but I would like to think in terms of doing the parking lot paving next summer. I don't see any reason why we can't be ready to do that. We can get that ready, planned, decided, all that.
While we're on the topic of.
In the winter.
While we're on the topic of parking lot, and as Sean alluded to, this came up at our city council meeting last week. The concern from Chief Pointer seems to be that, that the question always comes up from residents is, well, can we direct traffic? And their response is, we really don't have any place to direct traffic to, right? So there's only so much infrastructure there. And he seemed to think that it would help to have more queuing offsite on school property. If we can get more cars off of Highway 64 and onto school property, it would help with overall traffic flow. So has there been any consideration as far as what we can do in our parking? Are we just looking at repaving, or are we going to be, is there any room
Well,
to
you know,
do?
we're talking about around the high school?
Middle school. I
Middle
think.
school. Middle school and
Okay.
primary.
I was going to say, we've got, we've got, I don't remember the number of parking spaces around the high school is quite large.
Right.
Middle school is the problem. We looked at, a month ago, one of the ideas I had is when you turn in the entrance drive, is then immediately after you turn in, adding a loop out to the east,
Yes.
just to lengthen the queuing time, the queuing lane. And we're looking at that. I agree with you.
And we see the same thing like at Chick-fil-A on Rogers Avenue. If they could get more cars off of Rogers Avenue, the traffic would
Right.
be, so.
That's something, again, we just looked at it ourselves. I didn't get any engineering done on it, but no, there's some things like that before we do finish up the planning on this paving project that we need to look at, for sure.
Thank you.
John, Mr. Wolf could tell you that this year we're actually opening up that, Mr. Wolf, you want to say that gate there?
The fence.
There's a gate that blocks off the parking where it could extend down to the end of the building. I think at one time, the buses are out front, maybe. Opening that gate and moving our sixth grade down there, and also help spread out students at back pickup so they're more socially distanced, but allowing sixth grade to pull through there. I think it's another 5 cars in the lane off the road as well.
We think that'll help in the afternoons. Some. It's not, won't solve the problem, but it'll help. You know, it just seemed like a few years ago, just all of a sudden, we had this explosion of cars coming to school, and kids, not nearly as many kids riding the bus. It just seemed to have happened all at once, and it's just continued to get worse. To keep going, paving and building this building are totally different things. So there's no problem kind of working those both at the same time. We'll obviously still be building on this next summer, but it's no problem to do the paving at the same time. And again, keep in mind, that's just my best thoughts right now. I'm certainly not going to tell you that's for sure going to happen. Sometime about the time we wrap this up, we will get into the design of the administration building expansion. Maybe have that ready to go out for construction. And again, I'm just throwing something out there. Maybe January of '22, a year and a half from now, something like that. I don't want to get too much going at one time. We're not big enough to manage. We don't have enough people to manage a whole lot of construction all at once. So I'd kind of like to get this finished or close before we start the next project. And then the last piece that we've talked about doing is then converting the annex into an early childhood, and that would then follow after we move into the administration building. So that's kind of the timeline.
So where are we numbers on this, on the agriculture barn?
On just the barn?
Sure.
About $1.5 million.
Just the barn.
Just the barn,
Yeah.
not the other
Correct.
building.
I think each will be about $1.5 million. And again, if you write that down, please write it down in pencil. But that's our best thought right now.
What about activity
until
center?
until we get into a lot
And
more.
that's on land you own now.
Design features.
And then, weren't we at like 4 million on your
Yeah.
PowerPoint on the other one for?
Yeah.
What was, I thought the activity center.
About
we-
4.
We have estimated at 4? I was thinking.
Then
5.
about $1 million on parking lots and about $1 million on the administration building. And that still leaves a little bit of
We-
surplus. And let me just go ahead and say this too. We've got, I don't anticipate needing to do this. I don't. But the way this bond issue is structured, if we need to at the end, we can sell some more bonds. I don't anticipate that, but we would be able to if it turns out that we've miscalculated or decide to do something different. We've got that ability to do that.
What do you have?
So, I mean, I was looking at the resolution in the budget, and you've got 5 million building fund expense, right?
Well, that's
So-
just for that year. That's just for that year after that. And what we're looking at, if you'll turn to that, item E in the agenda. That page, and this is something we have to do every year. If it's the 3rd page in item E. Yeah, I'm sorry we didn't get tags on the labels, the letter labels. Janet's been out. The 3rd page that's entitled Proposed Budget of Expenditures.
Right.
This is a page we have to do every year, that not just this year, not just because we're asking for something different. And we have to estimate for this, our budget. Notice the years at the top. This is not this year that's starting. This is the next year.
I saw that.
So, and that's a quirky thing in state law. So, we're not bound by these numbers at all. These are strictly an estimate of what we think budget would look like for that fiscal year. And
And we can always amend the budget.
oh, sure, and this is not even something we have to do. This is just an estimate. It's not even, we're not bound by these numbers at all. This has to go in the newspaper advertising about the election. If you will look on the next page, the short paragraph near the top, not the very first paragraph, but the second 2-line paragraph, which is, a very important part of this, is that we are decreasing our tax rate by 1 mil in this whole thing. I talked with our fiscal agent at Stevens earlier this week. He said the market, of course, it's, we're not getting ready to sell them this week or next week, but he said the market has continued to improve. If you read the paper just about mortgage rates, you probably pay really close attention to this. They continue to sink, and all interest rates kind of move together. Municipal bonds, which is what a school bond, the class it falls in, they're at record lows right now.
So how did we get from a 1 mil or a 2 mil decrease to a 1 mil decrease?
Just being conservative, John, on our part. We did that back when we weren't sure what the market was going to do. Just being sure that we were going to have the revenue to make it work.
How conservative is that? Very conservative or?
With where the market is right now, it's not conservative at all. Meaning this will work easily.
Okay.
It depends on how you use the word conservative.
I understand.
Which way
It's
you're
just-
saying.
yeah, I'm
With
asking-
where the market is right now today, this works very well, very easily. But this gives us some cushion if the market goes back up before we can sell.
So for tonight, we would need to pass the resolution.
Yeah, this is the document, the proposed budget, no, going back to the very beginning. The page starting with resolution all the way through the sheet we were just looking at. This is the official document setting the election and proposing what we're going to do. It sets the election, it changes our millage, and it authorizes us to sell the bonds.
So how can you sell more, the way this is worded, and you said we could sell more bonds at the end, you've got 58,430,000. So, I mean, where is your ability to sell additional bonds at the tail end?
See if I can keep this simple. It's what's called second lien bonds. It's if we were to need to do that. Let me start another way. A second lien bond issue is tied to existing bonds. It can't go any longer than the existing bonds. It can't, you can't extend the payout period, and you can't change any of the terms of this issue of what these bonds are for. A second lien bond is an add-on, you might say. Since if we were to do this, we would do it pretty quickly, within the next year or two after this issue, 2-3 years, then the payout, the end date doesn't change, but it's still the same distance away. So a small, and we're not talking about anywhere near this, we're talking about, $500,000, $1 million, whatever it might be. We'd have plenty of time for the payment on that additional bond issue to not be very big, and we would have the revenue stream to meet it. So it's not changing this bond issue, it's a new bond issue that uses these same conditions. You can always do second lien bonds. We could do second lien bonds today if we had the money to make the payment.
Who?
Go ahead.
No, you go.
What's the total amount if we're at roughly 49 million debt now going to?
This is adding $10 million.
$10 million?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going for the 10 now. Do you think we'll need more than 10?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I'm just saying that if I'm wrong, it's not like we can't finish the project. Who knows, maybe, what if China quits shipping steel and the price of steel doubles in the next 6 months? You don't know. You know that better than anybody.
Don't ask me what studs are. Sky high.
If something unexpected happened, that's out there. And again, I probably shouldn't have even brought it up because I don't expect it to happen. I think we're fine on our budget.
So I guess one of my concerns is with everything else going on, I know the bond market is favorable at this time, but what happens when we go virtual for the next year or more, or I know just the company I work for, we're looking at expanding because we're out of office space. Well, now nobody's in the office, so should we?
Well, I don't think we're going to quit having school. Now, it may look different. It may, it may be different for a while, but I don't think we're going out of business. I don't think our community is getting ready to everybody move out of town. Do I know? I could be wrong about those statements, but I don't think so. I think we have to continue to plan for the future. If you wait till you know for sure, then you're late.
I get it. Yep.
I like the idea, like you've said, having kids in school. I mean, there's no replacement, and the more services like this ag program, this lab, this activity center, when everything does settle down, I think it's going to get the people back.
Sure, and we're not a perfect school district. Nowhere is. We all know that. We've got things that we ought to do better, and we constantly try to do better. But as I said to you earlier, we have, don't remember the number now, somewhere close to 100 school choice last spring by the deadline. If you looked at this agenda, this is a record number of board transfer requests, most we've ever had at once. People want to come to school here. We've got something good to offer, and people see that, and I don't see that changing. And having quality facilities that allow us to have great programs and allow students to grow and flourish is very attractive to people.
Well,
So,
and
and
I
I think that's why we've grown over the years and continue to.
But you could
The
say
thing
the same.
said with the blended classes, one of the reasons they're doing blended is to come to school for activities.
Yeah.
And this is another activity that they would need to come to school for.
And you could say the same thing about people moving to our community because of low property tax rates.
Right. And we're restructuring, it's a big number, but we're also reducing the interest rate on a large amount of our
That's right.
debts,
That's right.
But we can do that without the
We could,
without the building project.
you don't have to cash
No,
out.
we can't. We have to borrow money to be able to take advantage of that because we're under a 5-year call window, right, for our other bonds?
Well, no, John's right. We could vote to, and ask the voters to approve refunding our bonds without borrowing any additional money. We could do that.
Aren't we in our 5-year window? Because when we just refinanced the last 25 million, there's a 5-year period, right?
Yeah, but either way, you could do what's called an advance refunding on that issue, either way. But you know, if I heard Charles Dyer say it once, I heard him say it 10,000 times. The children in Alma are just as deserving of the best there is that we can offer them as the children anywhere are. And I absolutely believe that statement. And if we have the opportunity to provide better facilities and better programs and more programs for our students, it's our obligation to do so. That's why we're here.
So how feasible is a 2 mil decrease like we were thinking back in March? Because just in no disrespect to what you just said, but I hear people that want to live in Cedarville, Mountain Bird, Woodbury, Van Buren District.
I don't have this in front of me, but even at these numbers, we will be lower than anybody in the county and many districts in the area.
By 1 mil?
Yeah.
Him and I ran some of the numbers on how much it saves, and, you know, this has to be done every year, right? We pass the mill.
Yeah, you have to, the voters have to vote on the millage rate every year.
Even if there's no decrease.
Yes.
So if it's just such an unknown time in reference to that, you know, when we have our next election next year in May or November, if we are sitting in a really good financial spot, we can, you know, we could do it again. So that, I felt good in knowing dropping it a mill and, you know, looking at how things flush out with the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand that, because I understand we may, our enrollment in 2 weeks may be less and it may drop, and who knows where we're all headed. My phone's gonna ring because everybody's gonna say, I thought it was 2 mil and now it's 1. And we're told the bond market is better now than it was in February, March.
I thought his PowerPoint, didn't your PowerPoint do 1 mil? Or?
No, it did too.
It did too?
Yeah.
That's, I guess we had for a few months have only
That's-
talked about
We've been
one.
talking about 1 with the last.
Yeah,
couple
that's
meetings.
1, but I forgot, I couldn't remember that.
And that's half, you know, like, could we go to 1.5, 1 3/4?
Well, again, I don't have I don't have a proposal that says that. We have to do this tonight because the County Election Commission has to know, they really wanted to know this earlier this week. They have to get the ballots ready, so they have to know what it's going to be.
We got 60 days prior to the election, and they like to have as much time as lead time, but in theory, you could call another special meeting. We don't have much time, but we have a little bit of time. It's got to run in the paper 60 days prior to the election, and Tim Walker's got to be able to program the ballot, so. Where do the bonds proceeds go in our accounting and our budget? What fund do they get put in?
In the building fund.
Unrestricted building fund?
What we will do, of course, we've been using the building fund as a reserve fund, and it'll still be the building fund, but we'll separate it into 2 pieces, 2 sections. One will be reserve, the other will be the actual bond proceeds.
But there's a statutory distinction on that, what they call that unrestricted building fund, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
In our world, that's Fund 3.
Who would,
Can we amend our resolution to say that bond proceeds will go in the unrestricted building fund, Fund 3?
Well, you can pass, I would not want to amend this because this document was prepared by Stevens and it meets the exact legal requirements. If the board wants to pass a resolution that says that, that'd be fine. But I would not want to do it to this one because we might run the risk of messing something up with the legal documents on bond issues, or the legal requirements on bond issues are very detailed. That's why you have to have somebody like Stevens to put it together for you.
I use lots of bond counsel, I'm aware.
how does the money get approved on how it's spent after it goes into a fund, the
Same way we
specific-
spend any money. Ultimately, the board approves it.
I mean, would we, so if, when you get the numbers back for the, you know, the ag lab, we have to approve it, and then what's next, like we do?
Depending on exactly how we do the building program, And we probably will not do a general contract where you put it, the whole thing out for bid. We'll probably do construction management. That's the way we've done our last several buildings. But yes, I mean, it's just like anything else we do. Ultimately, the board approves the expenditures. When you approve the budget, you're approving those expenditures. If you want me to bring you each proposal as part of the construction, for you to vote on each proposal, each contract, if you will, we can do that. That's up to you.
Somewhere I was led to believe that every dollar out of the unrestricted building fund had to be approved in an open meeting. Is that?
I don't know if that is being a requirement, and we've not done that in the past, but I have no problem doing that if y'all want to.
Well, I make a motion that any dollar spent out of the unrestricted building fund be approved in an open, public meeting.
Okay.
Second.
I have no problem with that.
A second.
Any discussion? Did y'all hear what he said?
This is basically just the bond money for new construction. Can you clarify what you?
My motion was any dollar out of the unrestricted building fund.
So anything we build on, any bond money that we spend, you all vote on.
Any dollar
On
out
that, on that specific expenditure.
Any
The
dollar
dollar
out of that
amount
fund.
or who's doing it?
I'm sorry?
The dollar amount or who's doing
Any
it?
No,
penny-
the actual expenditure.
Any penny.
Okay.
There was a
Dollar
s-
one or what? Never mind.
I
Well-
couldn't understand you. What?
There was
Never
a
mind.
second on that by where? Ron, what are you thinking?
No, I'm not thinking at all.
Mike, do you have any? You think that's completely doable?
Sure, I don't have any problem doing that at all.
And that's probably what we would have done anyways. You would have close to
You know,
it.
that is not the way we operate day to day, as you all know. We don't come in here with a list of bills for you to approve every meeting. And that's what Sean is saying on the building program that we will do. And I don't have any problem with that. I really don't.
I don't want to know when you buy copy paper, but
Yeah.
bond money, you betcha.
All right, we have a motion and a second, so let's do, who's in favor of that with a right hand vote? So we have, looks like Higgins is a no? Okay, and then everybody else is a yes. I don't know who's taking the minutes.
So that was motion passed?
Motion carries.
Thank you.
I found the 2018 millage rates, and I do not know if any of these have changed, but we're 43.4 currently. Van Buren's 42.6. So 1 mil would put us 2/10 below them. But Cedarville's 36, Mountainburg 39, and Mulberry 36.
Yeah, and you're right. I misspoke. I was thinking about Van Buren when I said that.
Which is a county average.
Yeah.
They calculate at 40.25.
And I think that's, important to note that a lot of these school transfers are coming in from some of those districts. They're paying lower property taxes and in other areas of the county.
You all may have run across it at some point in time. I did this 4 or 5 years ago. It was a document, a sheet, and we titled it the Alma Advantage. And if you compare our property taxes with our surrounding communities, Van Buren, Fort Smith, Greenwood, and the cost of owning a home, taxes, water and sewer, and house insurance, and of the 4 communities, put all that together, we were the lowest by a comfortable margin.
I just wanted to state that. I like the 2 mil idea because that's what we threw out there initially, and people latched onto that extremely well, and just given in the county where we're at. But I also hear it, not daily, not weekly, but I do hear it from a lot of people looking to move either out of the city or into the area. I hear millage rates are high here or whatever. And I'll be the first to admit that on $100,000, it's very little money year after year. But as
And
prices
actually-
go up, people
actually, if you-
pay attention to that.
If you combine all the millages, not just the school millage, and, the bottom line is the bottom line. If you combine the school millage, the city millage, the water district millage, all the different
Sure,
various
sure.
villages, ours is the lowest of the 4 communities, if you look at all the millages.
This is a state document, but it's got we're about in the middle. So it's not worth going over every one of them. That's my opinion, is the two. I liked the two because we initially started with that, and yes, it's been a crazy 6 months, very crazy in the whole world. But if the bond market is
Back to record lows.
similar what it is, and like you say, I mean, I'm hearing people get mortgage rates that are 3% and below.
Was two gonna cost us, that would be about a 600,000 deduction?
I'm sorry?
If the two, was that going to take about 600,000?
Difference in revenue, is that what you're saying?
Yes, because I think the one was 3.
1 mil brings in, let me think a second, 1 mil brings in us about $200,000. 1 mil is worth about $200,000 in annual revenue, in round numbers.
That sounds right to me, roughly. Is there our payment, or whatever we're paying now yearly, is it increasing, decreasing, staying the same?
Well,
should this go through?
it-
Are there any cash flow savings?
Yes.
There are?
Yes.
There are, even with the 1 mil included?
And again, they're making assumptions as to what the bonds sell for.
Exactly, yes, yes.
But at those assumptions, yes, there's a cash flow savings.
Do you know what that is? Roughly?
In the.
10,000 or?
No, it's more than that. It's in the hundreds.
It is?
It's a couple of hundred.
Okay.
One of the things you have to look at in a bond issue is what they call coverage. And bond buyers are very interested in coverage. Coverage is how much is your payment each year, and how much revenue are you going to have to meet that payment with. What bond buyers really like to see is 1.5 times. That the revenue pledged to the bond issue is 1.5 times that year's cost. Now, that's what they like to see. They rarely get to see that. The less revenue you have, obviously, the tighter that coverage becomes. You really can't sell. You bidders just won't bid on them if you get below about 1.1 times coverage. It varies from year to year, but these new bonds are in the 1.25 range right now. Again, making assumptions about what they sell for.
I don't know what everybody else thinks, but 2 is the number I liked, and
I'm worried about repayment. I'd go back to no change.
Well, when we talked about this in March, I thought what I heard from the board was that are we sure we want to lower the millage at all? That's what I came away from that meeting with. And so that was part of the thinking of going to 1 instead of 2, was splitting the difference, if you will.
You'll never get it back. I mean, I recognize that.
what about, I'm not gonna die on this hill, but 1.5, 1.4 to get it to an even number, something to, does anybody have any thoughts at all?
Trying to appeal to my OCD, I'd like to see an even number. But no,
If-
my concern is repayment, so
Well, and I'm there with you. I just hate it that we came out and said 2, and then we're still gonna spend the same amount of money, but only half the decrease 6 months later. When the bond market is in as good or better shape, given how crazy it is right now and how it's there. That's my thinking. Because my phone will ring tomorrow and say, I thought it was 2. I just refinanced it at.
My answer to somebody like that would be, we're trying to be conservative and be good stewards of taxpayers' money and be sure that the district stays in good financial shape.
And I agree.
I know, it's tough, because.
But at the same time, they'd say, well, then what can you do with 5 million instead of 10? That would be the question in return.
I hope people would just look at this and be appreciative of it being lowered, period. I would hope that would be the way people would think about it. That,
I agree.
It's unheard
yes.
of to do this.
I agree. My taxes will go down. We just told them 2, and now we're at 1.
What's everybody, John, what are you?
It's a tough decision. I mean, there's pros and cons, so like I said, both ways. You mean,
Well, the reason I brought it up in quite a bit of detail last month and made it very clear, was very careful to be sure that I pointed this out, that would have been the time to talk about doing something different from what we were proposing, rather than here at the last minute.
Because you're saying it has to get to the paper and publish within,
It's got to run in the paper 60 days before the election, and Tim, he's already almost done programming the ballot.
They're waiting on us.
Yeah, I talked to him today. That's
Was
correct.
the 1 mil stated last month?
Yeah.
It
We
was.
talked about that a good deal.
Yeah, we've been at 1 mil for a while. We hadn't been at 2 in a long time.
It's been a long time since 2.
I mean, you could maybe arm twist me to 1.15 and get it to 17 and a quarter.
but that doesn't help us with,
Yes.
would you,
Oh, we could change this tonight. Hell, that doesn't matter. I mean, you could change that number. That's not going to screw up bond council.
What are we changing, David?
I'm sorry,
What are we changing?
the millage rate
Yeah,
from 43.4 to 42.4.
yeah, 1 point.
Yeah.
Okay, I heard somebody talking 2 points, 1 point. Oh, that's fine.
You just got to make a motion if you want to do something different.
Well, if we're going to do this, the board needs to pass something.
right, we're still,
I mean, at the end of the day, you got to call a special meeting anyway, right? If you don't pass it tonight and you want
Yeah.
him to give you numbers or support for we'll have to have a special meeting because we are at the end of the time, certainly.
Yeah, no, but you could amend it tonight to whatever
Yeah,
and pass it as amended
sure.
at that.
You bet.
It would require, I'd have to take that fact back to Stevens and let them rerun the numbers to be sure, to be positive that it works.
Sure.
And if it didn't, if they came back and said, this won't work,
we're done.
then we'd have to then do something different.
I mean, the issue would be if you change the numbers such that they won't be able to market the bonds, right?
Exactly, where they don't sell.
Right.
Yes.
'Cause sometimes
And then
they-
you're missing the November election that you're already having. You could always have an election once a year.
Nah,
You'd
they
have
make
to
so
pay
much money,
for it.
they'd run the numbers tomorrow.
Do what?
Stevens
Yeah.
makes so much damn money, they'd run the numbers
Oh,
tomorrow.
I know
That's
that.
a non-issue.
Yes.
But we
Yes.
can't meet, or at least we could meet again.
Well, you could have a special meeting tomorrow afternoon.
It would have to be Monday for me.
Oh,
but I
you
mean,
can't, you can't go anywhere.
they've relaxed the rules, but it does then run the risk of the bonds not selling. So I guess I don't feel great about it, but knowing that no matter, even if we don't change the mill, it has to get voted on every year, so we could bring it right back up, but.
So, Mr. Wood, to be clear, you could have an election next year, the typical, that pass our bond only, our millage rate election, and you can, I didn't think you could lower it.
Given that, again, I don't want to say something wrong here, so let me be careful. Given that this resolution and then the vote of the people ties whatever millage rate we vote to these bonds, I'm not sure that you could just lower the millage
I understand.
legally because of the bond covenant.
Yeah.
The people that bought the bonds might, yeah.
They don't like for you to change the
have some
terms.
recourse, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're looking, if you count back from November 3rd, right? So it'd be first part of September. So you've roughly got, I mean, if you did a special meeting next week, that you could probably get away with it. And
Does it?
Well, I'm asking the question tonight. What does everybody else think? I mean, it takes 4 of 7 of where we're at. Does anybody else feel strongly about 1 to 2, 1 to 1.5, 1 to 1 1/4, anywhere but that, or am I the only one here? I mean, I'm fine being the only one for 2.
Yeah, I wouldn't, I'd probably even have to vote no on 2.
Okay. I mean,
Because my concern is repayment ability. I didn't really want to incur additional debt, so it makes me extraordinarily nervous prior to the COVID and the possible who knows?
Enrollment, yeah, I agree.
20% of the students start doing homeschool, you know? And I suppose we don't have to spend the money, and if the world blows up even worse than it already has, and enrollment drops, you know, you've not spent it until you've spent it, and
That is correct, isn't it?
You can pay it back.
If the world fell apart tomorrow, or January 1, the world falls apart, you don't have to go build stuff with the money, right?
Sure, you can turn around and just pay it all back.
Exactly, yeah.
We did that with the county. We had quite a bit of leftover money and just put it right back down to the principal and
Yeah.
then started paying on when we did the jail.
I mean, it's, you know, the
Yeah,
vaccine doesn't
you'd
work
incur a
out,
little
it
cost and a
gets
little
worse.
interest, but yeah.
Yeah,
say
but
it.
not a building half built, you can't pay for, exactly.
I'm excited to take a one, just, we are getting it lowered, but financially still feel like we can do what we need to do. But I get it. I'd love to do a 2 or 3.
Well, we mentioned too, and if we're already getting the cash flow savings, by refinancing at a lower rate, expected cash flow savings. So, looking at that, it sounds doable, but, I mean, support's gotta be there, and it doesn't sound like it is. So,
You could arm twist me to like 115 or something like that.
it's not worth editing it for that.
President, I'll make the motion, we accept the one.
I second it.
One millage,
Well, you gotta make a motion to pass the resolution.
to pass the resolution to.
As written.
Yeah, as written.
So we've been discussing it, but is there any more discussion? I mean, I'm open. I mean.
She did a second, Ms. Pat said second.
Right, so then we're at a discussion.
She's calling for discussion.
We've discussed it enough for me.
I'm satisfied we beat a dead horse.
So let's take a vote. All in favor of the resolution as printed, right hand vote. And then, so that passes, and we have 1 no from Rucker.
You know, as I just want to say this, Chapin. As I said to you back when we first presented this in February, in my experience, what gets an election like this defeated by the public is for the board not being unified behind it.
And I'll go on record, I'm in support of the project, I'm just as written where we started.
You would
at.
floor me if you got a millage reduction that failed.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would agree to that,
I'd be
too.
shocked.
I'll trust your judgment.
Well, I think
Hey,
everybody will.
I have been shocked, but
No,
that would be shocking.
I've had at least one patron tell me that they didn't think we should drop it at all.
And I think everybody
And
understands.
I could vote to keep it the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I clearly didn't, but
But I think everybody would understand he's doing that not in support of what we're fixing to build, just trying to, you know.
No, not at all.
Chapin, I very sincerely ask you and hope that you will publicly tell people that you are for this, because that's important.
I just did.
I mean, I don't know, notwithstanding what Sean's just said, but that's important. Okay, next item. Just a little thing called our 2021 budget. If you will turn to item F, and again, I apologize for not having them labeled. And this is not a difficult thing, I hope. If you look at the page that's typed up that says budgeted balance at the top, it's just 4 or 5 lines, 6 lines. You see our beginning balance, and this is looking at the school year that's right now starting. You'll see our beginning balance, what we're projecting for revenue, what we're expecting for expenditures. The 4th line is a budget surplus that we think we'll have, that we will transfer to reserve. And then you see that our ending balance is just a tad more than our starting balance, about $5,000. And then I've showed just as a notation what our reserve fund balance is. I will note that our balance is a little bit, but only a little bit, lower than what the state recommends a balance be. They would like to see our balance be about 2 million, and we're projecting 1.8. So we're in a lot better shape than we used to be in terms of what kind of reserve fund we have. If you look at the second page, which is looking at revenue in more detail, I want to point out a couple of things. If you look down at the bottom line, budgeted for last year versus actual for last year, some various things throughout the budget where we budgeted conservative and came in better than we budgeted. But the big difference is the flood insurance proceeds. So you see that we're budgeting for next year as compared to what we budgeted for this year, again, taking the flood money out, just, what, $250,000 more than this year. So again, we're being pretty conservative with revenue. If you look at the next page, this is the same information same type of information on expenditures. And again, our actual expenditures were more than our budget because of the flood. And you will see that we are budgeting expenditures to be even less of an increase than revenue was. This budget does not contain any money for a salary increase. We typically don't budget for that because we don't ever know for sure that we will be able to do it. I hope we will be able to, like we've been doing it mid-year. I anticipate that we will be able to because we've budgeted revenue conservatively, and when it comes in better than budgeted, then we're in great shape to do that. This is a good, sound budget. It's not flashy. Doesn't really have anything new in it or different. It's just continuing on about the same path we've been on.
Could you explain the 2260, the state preschool?
Say again?
The line 2260.
Revenue or expenditure?
Expenditures. The 2021
Oh,
budget.
that is a change in how the state does something. We have school districts are responsible for special education preschool children. We're responsible for that, their program. In the past, up until this year, this is state money that has funded that, paid directly to our co-op who provides the services. This year, they're changing a process, and the money comes to us, and then we turn right around and send it to the co-op.
Okay. Thank you.
On the expenditures, the 2,000, the operating, that extra million or so, that's the flood?
Yes.
Okay.
Has that been settled yet?
Yes, we're completely done. Well, I say that. Remember, gosh, when was it? I got a call from our insurance company saying that the other insurance company that was really responsible was balking at paying. Now, we're out of it, but the two insurance companies are still talking with each other, arguing with each other.
I believe
Okay.
there may be a lawsuit filed, but,
Okay.
Yeah.
because I was contacted by an attorney as well.
Was there any CARES money that we received? Is it reflected in, did we
No,
get
it's
any?
not in this budget at all because it's earmarked, and quite honestly, we spent most of it on all the things we've done. You've heard us talking about PPCs and Chromebooks and Wi-Fi hotspots. That's where that money's gone.
Okay. How much did we get?
A little under $500,000.
Do I have a motion to approve the budget?
Move to approve the budget.
Second.
Any more discussion on it? All in favor with a right hand vote? Any opposed? Passes unanimously. We've
As I
got-
mentioned a few minutes ago, we've got, if I remember correctly, there's 26 students in these, represented in these petitions for transfer. 25 of the 26 are coming to us. One is going from us to another district. And as I said, we've never had in one batch this many. I don't have any explanation as to why. They just keep rolling in. But, and of course, some of them have already been approved by the other districts, some of them have not, and there's always that chance. And we always tell people, until both boards have approved it, it's not a done deal. And we can't speak for what the board of another district may or may not do. We're always very careful to tell people that.
Move to approve the transfers.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor with the right hand vote? Passes unanimously.
Well, I think you all have done a great thing for the children of Alma tonight in several different ways. If you're standing, you know how the saying goes, and I probably won't read it right. If all you're doing is standing still, you're really moving backwards. And we're taking a step forward for our students, and that's what we should always do.
Motion to
Move to
adjourn?
adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?